Okie dokie, I believe we are all the way live. Hello and welcome to my graveyard. I'm your host of the evening, the Cemetery Man from Salem, Mass. Always taking names and kicking candy ass. Live and in living color here with you only on Grande's Graveyard. Yes, ladies and gents, we are here. We are live and in living color. And tonight we have not one, not two, but three wonderful guests on the Horror Roundtable number 8. Jason Takes Manhattan. Yes, ladies and gents. Super happy to have you all in the house tonight. I have some wonderful content creators. We got, of course, to my immediate left, right. I don't know. This camera's kind of weird, but this guy is awesome. His horror knowledge is vast and out of control. He is the one, the only Neon Black Reviews. Good brother Neil. What's up, man?
Not much, man. Happy to be here and have a little discussion with you guys.
Yeah. Dude, hey, man, I'm appreciated that you can make the time tonight. And I know that you've been picking a couple of movies a decade, like 3 or 4 from the 70s, 3 or 4 from the 80s. You just reviewed Creepshow, which I'm sure would interest this guy right here because he's biggest George Romero fan on God's green earth. So definitely awesome. Check out Neil's channel if you want to subscribe to Neil. I'll put it in the link below if I haven't already. Right below him, we have good brother Justin, aka if you know him, don't tell his work buddies, but on Instagram, he's Marco T Beast. Yes, Marco is in the house. What's going on, Marco?
Good evening to you guys. It's still afternoon here in Seattle, but I'm a little jealous. Everybody's got cool looking microphones. I look like I'm hosting Thursday Night Football.
Yeah, you look like the analyst. So, Tony, what do we think tonight? But, dude, no, appreciate you making the time tonight. And I know you do a podcast with your son that I was like, please plug. Go ahead, tell us about it.
Yeah, we do a little dog and pony show called Video Store Massacre Podcast, where my son, who is obviously younger than me, Gen Z, I'm a Gen Xer. We pick one movie from my decade of watching horror movies. He picks one from his decade of watching horror movies that are similar in tone or alike. And we talk about them in depth and shoot the shit about them and other things. We record when we can. My son's he's an engineering student, so he's kind of tied to his college classes. So we kind of record when he's on break or whenever he gets a break. So we're not consistent. So we're not a consistent once a week, that sort of thing.
Totally. But your show is good. I have listened to it. I think it's really, really cool. And he's had some awesome people on. He's had AJ on, dear friend, so many cool people from the Instagram world. So I was thinking of guests tonight. I'm like, man, I would love to get him on. So thank you for making the time. And of course, right below me and to his immediate left, he is the one, the only, the Alpha. Romero. Welcome, my friend. What's going on?
Oh, it's that way. Oh, no, I can't.
We're going to get used to this at some point. Which way do we turn?
Yeah.
What's up, everybody? How you guys are doing well out there? It's my first time meeting Neil, first time meeting Justin or Marco as his, work
non-diplom. Yeah.
His kayfabe name.
But happy to be here. I haven't really done a roundtable like this before. I'm usually stuck in the Romero universe talking about nothing but Romero and John Russo and everybody in that universe. So I'm pretty excited to get on here and talk about something different for first. But before we do that, you mentioned, I just wanted to show this off real quick. When you mentioned Creepshow, I actually got this in the mail the other day. It's the big box original Warner Brothers Creepshow release from 1983. Wow. Been looking at this. I found it for a good price on eBay. And so I couldn't pass it up. I already own it on like every other format, but I was like, hey, you can't turn that down. So yeah, that's pretty cool. But yeah, been looking forward to doing this for quite a while, and excited to see what you guys have in store to talk about tonight.
Absolutely. Yeah, no. And I'm happy you all can make the trip here tonight. And I know, yeah, it's weird. These are all complete strangers. I've done this twice. I've done this once before. This is number 2. So I'm happy to throw some complete stranger horror diehards in the chat together. And, hopefully something organic and fun comes out of it. But of course, let's not neglect the chat before we get into the horror roundtable topics. Of course, Miss C is here. Ciao, Grande and friends. Welcome, Miss C. We got Chris C, the slasher dude in the house. Evening all. Slash the like. Thank you, Chris C. We got Hearst Hill, ahoy, ahoy. That's a first timer. I don't know if it's a triple H, but it is a double H.
I've seen him on my channel before. He's a cool guy.
Oh, very cool. Okay.
He's
Mateo is
trustworthy.
here. Ciao, Grande. Roundtables are always fun. Hi to the whole Graveyard family. Awesome. Awesome. We got Scream 7 in the house. What a collective panel. It is an honor. Dude, thank you so much for saying that. Scream 7. AJ Zitro, speak of the devil. There he is. AJ's in the house. Anthony Chobut, how you doing, buddy? Got an interview with Have Cheetah Will View on Monday. Awesome, man. Well, good luck with that. Before we get into topics, Justin here is a first timer on Grande's Graveyard, so we got to do a one question initiation before we jump into the horror roundtable of fuck.
Here we go.
We got to initiate this guy. All right, Justin, Mr. H, if you will. Your question, my friend, right here. You got one dinner to go with any two horror celebrities, living or dead. Where are you going to eat? Which two horror celebrities are you taking?
Oh, it's two horror celebrities because I've seen the show. I thought it was. For some reason, thought it was one, so I was prepared. PJ Souls for sure. PJ Souls, but like 22-year-old PJ Souls.
Well,
So like I build a time machine because I've met PJ Souls now. And she's a grandmother. PJ Souls, and the you want to know where we're going to dinner?
Yeah, where are you taking PJ?
AJ's favorite restaurant, Old Country Buffet.
Okay.
Very romantic.
Yeah,
PJ
very
and
romantic.
AJ's. That's cool.
PJ,
That's very cool.
PJ, no. I saw he said hello, so I needed that. Got to get that dig in there. And then the second celebrity in horror, Lucio Fulci. I mean, why not? And then I'll take him to Olive Garden so he can call me a piece of shit for taking him to a.
What is this bullshit?
The breadsticks suck.
That's right. Well, what's the with?
They'll treat you like family, though, man. You can't go wrong.
Yeah, that's right.
Her says thanks. Alpha, Ghostface Brett's in the house. What's up? AJ says hi again. Like totally, yeah. We gotta quote PJ. I always forget my chemistry book, my math book. The 22-year-old PJ Souls is getting out on a nice hot date with Justin. So very cool. But all right, guys, we have initiated this man to the graveyard. I say let's rock this round table. Who wants to kick us off? Who's got the first topic? Any of you guys? Bueller.
All right, I'll do it.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
All right.
I was gonna say,
I
you want
guess-
to go what is this? Clockwise?
So whoever
Yeah,
goes
be clockwise
first, you
on my
just go
screen.
clockwise from there.
Okay.
All
So the movies where John Travolta plays a mentally retarded man, that's off the that's off the table because you're not allowed to say mentally retarded on air. So
right. I guess so. Only on the graveyard.
yeah, that's right. Only on the graveyard. Yeah, because there's about like 6 of them the last count I had. So
At least.
yeah, that's an in joke between Grande and I. The first one, my first topic that I kind of put thought into would be punk rock horror movies that are not Return of the Living Dead. There's a ton of heavy metal horror movies, but the punk rock horror movies, those are few and far between. And then all of them that get made seem to be pretty damn good. You got my personal favorite is Wild Zero. I don't know if you guys have ever seen that one. Since we have Alpha Romero on the show, I saw one review for it that said it's basically Rock and Roll High School if it was directed by George Romero in 1978 instead of Dawn of the Dead, if he chose to direct Rock and Roll High School. It stars the Japanese punk band Guitar Wolf, and I want to make sure I don't butcher the name. That's why I'm looking down here. It's directed by Tetsuro Takeyachi, who's done a ton of smaller horror movies, but that's a really good one. Then there's one that came out a couple of years ago. I think it was during the pandemic, in the middle of it. Uncle Peckerhead. I don't know if anybody's seen that.
I heard of that. Yeah,
That's a
It's
kick-ass movie. And of course, the Green Room is another that's like, and Patrick Stewart's performance in that is probably one of the creepiest performances in a movie in decades. But yeah, there's a smaller one called Straight Edge Kager. That's a real good one. Yeah. Have you seen that one, Grande?
I have. Yes, I have.
Yeah.
I had to because I am straight edge. So I was like, straight edge kegger. Like, what is
Yeah,
this?
the name, and like the only way to get it was to buy it, but it was like cheap. It was like $7.99. So to buy the
Yeah.
Blu-ray rather. So it's not a bad movie. So I mean, it's cheaply. I think it was made for the same amount of money I bought it for. But
Yeah, it was about
yeah,
$7 movie.
yeah, but it's still good. Yeah, so there's a ton of, I mean, a ton. There's a lot of good ones. Return of the Living Dead, of course, but that's why I excluded that movie.
Would you consider Texas Chainsaw 2 to be somewhat because of the soundtrack? Because the soundtrack for Texas Chainsaw 2 for like an 80s
Yeah,
new wave punkish. I mean,
yeah, I
soundtrack
don't know.
alone, I guess, mainly.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the soundtrack alone, I don't, I don't know because I'm wondering if the soundtrack is that way just because like those were the cheapest bands they can get on the soundtrack. You know, when they bought the rights to the music,
Probably.
those are the cheapest rights. Were the Cramps and Oingo Boingo at the time. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I'm thinking more like movies with punks in them. You know, horror movies with punks in it. I mean,
Okay, so not,
it's debatable as to whether or not like Repo Man would be on that list. I wouldn't put it on that list. Class of 1984 maybe would be on that list. Um, that's one of those movies that's like it's like one of those horror adjacent movies. Class of 1984.
Have any of you ever seen Nomads with Pierce Brosnan? That's a pretty
Yeah,
good one where the punks aren't. It's like one of the few where the punks are actually the villains. They attack
yeah,
Pierce Brosnan and his wife. That I always thought that was a really underrated movie. Like no one talks about. I think I got a Blu-ray release not terribly long ago, and I was like, wow, this is actually a pretty good movie. Like not bad at all.
yeah. The thing about Nomads is that like prior to that, like that was I think it was like 86, 87 maybe.
Yeah,
That Nomads, like prior to that, if you look at movies that came out prior to that, they were all budget slasher, really low budget slashers. And then that and uh, Near Dark came out, and those looked like MTV videos. And that's when like horror movies started to look like MTV videos. You know, you had the Lost Boys after followed like that, and Nomads was one of the first because I think the director was a video director prior to making that movie.
yeah.
That was that transition from like really low budget trash to 42nd Street Grindhouse to the VHS market had started to take over and movies started to resemble.
I don't know.
music
Like I
videos.
don't know another one that doesn't necessarily have punks in it, but Vamp came to my brain like because I don't know.
Yeah,
Just because of the setting, maybe, and like I don't know the
right,
vibe.
right.
That movie's so 1986, like that. Like I guess that's the big like era, like 85, 86, like the later 80s. That's when the punk rock just really just took off. But like, yeah, you mentioned Green Room. I don't know if the rest of you have seen Green Room. I thought that was a pretty solid movie too. I was actually like astonished by how serious it was taken, and like
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Green Room is just. I mean, it has. I mean, I read the interview with last name is Macon. I forgot his first name. The guy who wrote it and starred in it. He's also doing the new Toxic Avenger remake.
oh, is he? I didn't know that.
Yeah. Last name is Macon. But he took influence from not only Assault on Precinct 13, which you can see in that, but believe it or not, he took influence from Race with the Devil. Which you think about it, it's like, oh shit, yeah, you're right. Race with the Devil is is a big influence on. You could see that in Green Room. So
Sure.
Yeah, I saw Green Room in the theater when it came out.
I did too.
That's probably the last time I've seen it. I actually bought it on Blu-ray not too long ago because I guess the 4K or whatever just came out, so people are getting rid of their Blu-rays. So that's usually when I scoop up a bunch of Blu-rays. So when it gets re-released in 4K. But I've been meaning to go back and rewatch it because I remember liking it a whole lot. And it was kind of one of those movies that when it came out, there was a lot of hype and a lot of talk about it. And then after a while, it just kind of got lost in the shuffle somewhere until the most recently being released in 4K. So that's why I need to go back and rewatch because I remember liking it a whole lot. Because I used to play in punk bands and shit back in the day, and I've been in that situation before where you don't know what the venue is going to be when you show up, and you pull up and you're like fuck, what did I get myself into? Like, what is this place? So yeah, it was a relatable premise in that way, but I remember liking it a whole lot. So I might have to go back and check that one out.
I
Yeah,
remember.
and I saw it in the theater too. And it was really strange because it was like a Friday night. And I normally don't go to the theater on Fridays, but I wanted to go see it. And it was like the 7:30 showing. And I was the only person that watched it. I was in a 400 seat theater by myself, sitting dead in the middle of it, you know.
I think every horror
sound,
fan
big
can say
screen.
that, though. Every horror fan has had that experience.
I think it's just
Well, that's the only time it's ever happened to me. There's been a few
really?
times where I thought, you know, I'm going to get to watch this by myself, and somebody will come in, you know, like halfway through the
fuck it up.
the trailers, you know, and I'm like, you know, wrong theater, go the fuck the other way. But but I did. I got to see Green Room by myself, and what was so weird about it, you know, is I've been sitting there for like an hour and a half, hour 40 minutes, however long it was, and I walked out into the lobby, and there's like 400 people in the lobby waiting to get popcorn and stuff, and I was just forgot, you know, that I was actually.
They're at the next show. They're at the next show of Green Room.
Well, there was
they're
something
going to
else
see
big that was opening.
Captain
that
America:
weekend.
Civil War or some shit like that.
Yeah, it was probably going up
it
against
was probably a Marvel movie that everybody was there to see. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I'm just sitting in this big ass theater all by myself, you know, and I really enjoyed the movie too. I didn't know anything about it other than it had Patrick Stewart in it, and I was, you know, big Star Trek fan, so obviously I'm going to go see it. So, but yeah, it ended up being a really good movie, I thought, and I own it on Blu-ray too. I've probably watched it, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 times now, and still like it. So yeah, I think it holds up pretty well too.
I think it was just I just think it was such a niche type of movie. Like, not a lot of people are gonna identify with, you know, punk band traveling, running into Nazis, and then the gore and the horror that goes on. It's just like not a very mainstream type of movie.
Yeah.
So that's probably why it wasn't a huge theatrical success. But
Right. Yeah. But Will, the cabinet of Dr. Howdy, he and I were chatting about it, the movie Green Room once, and we thought it would be funnier. A funny idea if it was shot like. You guys ever hear of the band Anvil?
Yeah, Sleepaway Camp 2.
Yeah. Anvil. If they took the band Anvil and like didn't tell them they were shooting a movie and just dropped them in the middle of like this racist Nazi place and see if they actually play the show, and those cats are so desperate that they probably would. Like, they'd look around and be like, "Oh yeah, let's do the show, man. We'll get paid $350." You know, like the lead guy in Anvil. I don't know if you've watched the documentary about Anvil.
I haven't, but I have to.
Yeah,
they're
so such
good.
losers. But the lead guy from Anvil is a fucking lunch lady, and when he's not playing an Anvil.
Oh my god! This sounds like it could only come to the mind of the cabinet of Dr. Howdy.
No, so yeah. No, I mean, we were like, yeah, it would be better if it was Anvil instead of like some made up band.
That's incredible. We got Brittany Ward in the house. Says, "Hey, Grande, Roundtable, and Graveyard Crew. Neil, I love the shirt. The Fly is a classic, dude. That is an awesome ass shirt. So, absolutely. But is there any other punk rock horror movies you guys want to mention before we go to our next topic?
I wouldn't say it's a punk rock horror movie, but it's a horror movie with a classic punk rock band in it. And being the George Romero fan that I am,
Oh yeah,
Bruiser with the Misfits at the end. Come on, that was the Halloween or costume party or whatever at the end where the Misfits are playing and everything's going on. That's like my dream Halloween party to go to. Like, if that was ever a thing, I would kill to go to it. But
oh man, I would second that. And the song they play, the Descending Angel, oh, that's my favorite Misfit song. I love that song. Like, I always say, if I ever became a pro wrestler, I would come out to that friggin' song. Like, it's just the best. Like, stand by my side. And I know you're also with me. We like Graves over Danzig, which we got some shit for.
Yeah.
But I thought that
there's also Dawn of the Dead. The biker with the Tommy gun, he's like Johnny Ramone's doppelganger. If you think about it,
a little bit.
He looks exactly like Johnny Ramone. Like, I used to when I first saw that movie, I was like, is that Johnny Ramone? Like, it would have made sense that Johnny.
Yeah,
At
and
the
the thing with
time, it was a
Dawn is
kid
that it
movie.
could have been because anybody
Yeah,
would
that's
just
what I'm
show
saying. It
up
was
and
like
they'd be like, "All right, you can be in a movie." What the hell?
Yeah, like I was like, well, it would have made sense. Oh, let's get one of these guys from the Ramones to be in the movie, play the biker.
Yeah,
You know, it would have
He's
been.
got a leather jacket. He'll work.
Yeah,
Pet Cemetery's got all the Ramones music in it, so that could.
yeah, that's right.
Sheena
That's
is a punk rocker as the kid gets taken out by a 16-wheeler.
right.
So.
That's right.
I don't want to be buried.
And the remake has or the newer version, not really a remake because it's an adaptation. The newer adaptation has a candy-ass version of Pet Cemetery from the Ramones playing.
Oh, is
end.
it?
Mm.
I
It's a
didn't
very
see
candy-ass like effects on the vocals type.
I saw the only thing I saw from that remake was like the truck sequence again, and it was more something like out of Final Destination than it was out of. I was like, what? Like, and they killed. Whoa, we killed the other kid. Oh, I was like, oh man, I turned it right off. I was like, no, it's like,
Thanks.
white flag. Nope, not doing it.
Yeah, the village in the remake, the place wherever they live. I forgot the name of the town. The town they live in. Like it's taking place at Halloween time, but yet the trees are full of leaves, green leaves, and they're not autumn colors. So it has it's like, is this supposed to be like kids are walking around trick or treating, but it's clearly summertime in the movie, and it's like the opposite of Jaws. When Chief Brody's walking down the street, it's supposed to be July 4th weekend, but none of the trees have leaves on them. So
how did I never notice that? That is crazy.
I noticed because I'm a piece of shit and notice things. That's when I can tear down movies.
I look for the flaws and things.
Yeah.
Where are the leaves? Damn it!
Spielberg ain't that great. He didn't have leaves on the trees in Jaws.
No.
It's like the palm trees in the background of Halloween. It's supposed to be taking place in Illinois, but if you look in the back, there's palm trees and shit everywhere.
Yep.
It's funny because I'd always heard that, and it's like, I've seen Halloween 100 times, and I've never seen a fucking palm tree in it. I actually watched it one night with the sole purpose of finding one. And you're right, if you have to like freeze frame it.
Yeah.
And it's like when they're crossing the street at like the beginning when she's walking the little boy to the school. If you freeze it and you can see way off in the background, there is a palm tree. And I was like, how the hell did anybody ever see that?
That's a good question, man. I've never
like
noticed
me.
that either.
Yeah.
Oh man, if nobody had ever told me that, I'd have never seen it. Now, of course, I can't miss it. I've probably seen
Now
it
you're like, oh, there it is.
Oh, here comes the palm tree.
Yep.
I was more wondering, it's like, why are they walking home from school and kids are already out trick or treating? That was, what I was.
Yeah, that was like, was that a thing? Well, I was like, is that a thing in the 70s? So it's trick or treating during the day?
That's how it is now. Kids now, your parents won't let you go out after dark. Kids go trick or treating. Fucking.
Not here in Seattle. They don't start until the sundown. So sundown.
When I was a kid, we couldn't go until the sun was down. My parents wouldn't let us out of the house. You got to let people eat dinner first, and it's like, okay,
exactly.
But we'd have gone as soon as we got out of school. I mean, we were ready.
We're also so far up north that the sun comes down in October. Sun's usually down by 4:30, 5 o'clock.
Oh no, it doesn't get dark here till like 8:30. So
yeah.
well, around Halloween it'd be dark around 6:30. So
yeah,
wasn't too late.
Alpha, my friend, what do you got for us? What's your topic?
Let's see. I got a couple of different things here. Tell you what, since Neil's wearing the T-shirt of one of the all-time great remakes in horror history, The Fly, and remakes in general, when you ask a horror fan, when they remake a classic horror film, usually it's pretty polarizing. You're either going to say, oh, it was great, or it was complete shit. Very rarely is it like, oh, that was okay, or whatever. It's very one, either side. So I just wanted to see if you guys could come up with maybe some underrated horror remakes that don't really get talked about that you thought was like, oh, this is actually pretty good. This actually kind of worked out, but doesn't get taught. Like when you talk about horror remakes, everybody mentions Texas Chainsaw 2003 or Dawn of the Dead 2004. And then when you talk about bad remakes, everybody goes back to The Fog, or, you can go 1,000 of those. But I was just thinking, because I was thinking about this movie the other day, and it's like, I think it's a really, really good remake. I was very surprised when I saw it, but nobody ever talks about it. But it's the original is one of my all-time favorite horror films. Definitely my favorite slasher of all time. And it's the Maniac remake with Elijah Wood. Nobody ever talks about that Maniac remake. I think the soundtrack is amazing. It's one of the best horror soundtracks of the past, I don't know, 50 years or however long it's been out. The concept, I just feel like it captured the essence of the original, or the original was shot in the US, like it was shot in New York, but it felt Italian or European in some ways. I thought it captured that. I don't know. I really, this is one of my favorite remakes of any movie. And it's a remake of a movie that I absolutely love. So I was expecting it to be like, oh, this is going to fucking suck. But it turns out, like, I was like, oh, I really, really dig this. And nobody mentions it ever. So I just want to see if anybody else has any other remakes that really don't get talked about too much that you thought did the original justice, or, that you thought maybe outdid the original in some way.
Well, I definitely like the Maniac remake, and y'all can't really see it, but I've got the poster on the wall back there for the original. It's one of my favorite slashers from 1980. So one of the things that I liked, about the Maniac remake is, if you watch the original, especially when it came out, you didn't get a whole lot of slashers that were told point of view from the killer's perspective.
Yeah, that's one
And then
aspect
they
I like.
took that idea and they made it the focus of the remake. I mean, it's completely shot, point of view. And the only time they break that is when they recreate the scene that's on that poster in the parking lot. That's when the camera swings around and you see Elijah Wood from the waist down, and they're, paying an homage to the original. But so, yeah, the Maniac remake would be one of those. Again, you don't hear a lot of people talk about it. As far as like my favorite remakes, and I'm pretty sure John doesn't like this one. I really like the Evil Dead remake. Because, I saw the original back in the 80s, and I mean, it was laughably bad when I was a teenager. I've got, a lot more respect for it now that I'm older and can go back and, and watch those older films, as an adult, and just see, just how groundbreaking the original Evil Dead was. But to me, the Evil Dead remake is what they wanted that movie to be back in the 80s when it came out. It's like, to me, it's a truly terrifying film. I mean, I think they got a lot of it right. And it's gory as fuck too. So that's another thing I like about it. Cause I mean, I'm a huge gore hound. So that's what I really like to see. And, a lot of movies, I don't want to see it every time, but yeah, the Evil Dead's one of the remakes that I think they did a really, really good job of recreating, the story from the original film.
That's a good pick. I think that's a really good pick. The chat seems to like Sorority Row, which is a few people said Sorority Row. I'm actually kind of shocked. Like, I'm shocked that
interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. Chris C says Last House on the Left remake is good in his opinion. Mateo, this is the one I was going to say. So Mateo says, John, brace yourself. Suspiria is a good remake. I agree, and I love Suspiria, the original. I thought that remake was really good because he worked it backwards. It was, I can't out color Argento, so we'll make all the colors bleak. I can't outdo Goblin, so we'll make all the music very. I think they used Tom York from Radiohead. He worked the entire movie backwards and tried to make it work for other reasons, and I thought that was the smartest thing. He went in knowing that I can't out Argento, so let me just try to make it my own thing. I thought that was why that really worked. Zombie Grease says Wood is no Spinell. Okay. And then Chris C says Evil Dead remake can be considered canon, actually. Totally. And I think too, like, I agree. Maniac's fantastic. I'll say The Blob. I think The Blob is one that deserves a little bit more love. I know it has a cult following.
We talked about too much.
Yeah, I guess, maybe it has too big of a cult following now but I would say Suspiria or The Blob. I think that's a really good one. I love Shawnee Smith. I like the entire cast. I think it's just a really fun adventure movie, and Chuck Russell did such a good job in the director's chair. I think this was right after he did Dream Warriors, and I thought he was just the perfect choice to do it. So I don't know. I would say that one for me. But what about you, Justin?
For the Evil Dead remake, I think it's one of those movies where the unrated version that they released after the fact was better than the movie they released. That's
I agree.
Hot take on that. And then
Yeah, I bought
Maniac,
it
yeah, Maniac, I held off for the longest time because I was just like, oh man, how could they remake Maniac? But it was actually, and it takes place in Los Angeles. It's like, the fuck, you know, that doesn't make sense. But it's actually quite good. I think Maniac was really good. My choice though is I'm going with House of Wax, the 2005 version, which it's, you know, it has Paris Hilton, and I think that kind of is what turned people off. That was at the point that came out at the point where she was like she was no longer in in people's good graces.
To get to see her die, so I mean that's worth watching it, right?
Yeah, but it was still like, oh man, Paris Hilton, now she's acting, you know.
Yeah, I think that turned a lot of people off to that movie when it first came out, because that was like at the peak of her being everywhere. And
did she have that show with Nicole Richie at that time?
Yeah,
it was right around that time. It had to be.
Yeah, but what's interesting about House of Wax is this is like this would be the third or fourth version of the House of Wax. It's more of a remake of Tourist Trap plot wise than of the original House of Wax.
Yeah, kind of.
And I think that's what makes it better is that you know, it becomes more of a straight on slasher film than the eccentric, you know, artist storyline. So so House of Wax and the effects, it was like one of the last, you know, of the early aughts, one of the last movies to actually use practical effects over CG.
And the wax house at the end was great.
Yeah.
But I can't really compare it to any of the originals because I've never seen them, so I don't know how well it actually works as a remake. But I enjoyed the film.
Yeah. The one with Vincent Price is now there's also the Wax Museum from 1930. It was 1933 where they used it's a good movie, but the only problem is that they were testing this weird coloring, trying to put color on in movies. So it takes place, you know, between the week between Christmas and New Year. So there's a lot of Christmas trees because they were testing the colors, how the color scheme would work, and it's a lot of like bluish, greenish, and then like, but people's skin tone is like still kind of weird because they didn't have color film yet, but yet they were testing out. They did a couple all horror movies, 2 or 3. They were all, like Dr. X, that movie. Warner Brothers was testing out just how to make these movies more palatable to the public, and so and it's actually got some pretty grisly scenes in it, considering it came out in the 30s. And then the Vincent Price one, you know, that's classic. It was in 3D, you know, it's in 3D. You can get the Blu-ray in 3D if you have a 3D player. You know,
and it's really kind of odd that I haven't seen it because I did a Halloween movie watching contest in October, probably about 10 years ago. And that's how we were doing it, was every week was a different decade. But we had like 1950 and earlier was like the first week. And I don't know how many I watched, but I watched a ton of old films that I'd never seen. But House of Wax, none of the House of Wax films was one of them. So
the 1950s version is also Charles Bronson's first lead role. So.
Oh, really? Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
It's crazy. Each one seemed to have a gimmick. The 31 played around with color. The 50s one had 3D, and the last one had Paris Hilton. So they all had a gimmick to try to get you into the theater, and the last one might have backfired a little bit. Chris C says Black Xmas. Do you guys like Black Xmas?
No, it's a piece of shit.
It's not.
I'm sorry, Chris C. No. There's one Black Christmas, and it's Bob Clark's Black Christmas. Other than that, I don't acknowledge.
I will say the Black Xmas, its favorite movie is the 2019 Black Christmas because of that movie, and now I feel like Black Xmas has become like a cult movie, just because
Black Xmas. Both those movies, both the remakes should have just been. They weren't remakes at all. They should have just been called something else.
Yeah,
the
I didn't
only
mind the
similarity-
first one, the first
No, the
remake. I
first-
didn't mind it.
Oh, the first remake.
But I haven't seen the one that came out, within the past several years, just because of what everybody said about it. I was
That's
like,
why
well,
you're
I don't
smarter
think I'll
than
like
me,
it.
buddy.
And then you got Jesus. You got. I mean, this drove me nuts when I was a teenager. The first one, you got Margot Kidder talking so dirty. She's like talks so dirty in that movie that it's like you can't, like, if you're a teenage boy like I was when I saw it, it's like, Jesus Christ.
Oh man,
Lois Lane there.
Margot Kidder and Olivia Hussey in that movie together. I mean, two of the best looking women. And Margot did a lot of horror. Like Margot's in Sisters with De Palma. Margot's in Amityville Horror later on in her career. And then of course everyone knows Lois Lane, but like I thought the first movie is just an untouchable. I kind of agree with Alpha. Like I don't despise the Xmas movie. I think it's bad, but it's not the worst considering the 2019 movie. Again, that's why I think I'm like, oh man, it can't get worse. Yeah, it got worse, like it was one of those kind of situations for me.
And
It's just one of those untouchable class. I don't know, man. It's just like, why does horror always get the short end of the stick when it comes to like remakes and stuff? It's like, it gets no respect whatsoever. It's like nobody's remaking Gone with the Wind with, whoever, all the Citizen Kane remake, it's like, no, everybody's like, no, that's a classic. Leave it alone. Let it be. And let's move on. But Texas Chainsaw, Black Christmas, all these that I just think are classic films in general. It's like, oh, we can make a buck off this. Let's throw some bimbos in a house and let some guy kill them. And it's like they missed the entire point of the original Black Christmas. The beauty of the original Black Christmas is that it's funny and you actually like the characters, the comedy between the police officers and the fellatio and all that. And then the girls in the sorority, you actually like them because they're funny. They're real people. So when they get killed off, you actually care, and it actually is scary because you do care about them, where it's just like, all right, we're just going to pimp the name out again and just throw some shit against the wall and see if it'll make a buck. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, and it tried, that remake tried to have style and colors and use the holiday themes, and like, it is what it is. I know that the Blu-ray is very sought after, but like, I think the big miss of that Xmas movie is that you just can't recreate what Bob Clark did. And like Bob Clark, I felt always kind of took from Baba, where you had the, Black Sunday and Blood and Black Lace. And then I look at, Black Christmas. Like I always felt like it was the unofficial Canadian, slasher Christmas Baba movie that we never got. And I just thought that was really what was missing. That third act in the 74 film where Olivia Hussey's running through the house and, we just hear screaming and hair pulling and things like that scares the shit out of me to this day. I don't think you can recapture that. I kind of agree with Alpha. And speaking of things that I know a lot of people said that couldn't be recaptured, Zombie Grease. What's our thoughts on Rob Zombie's Halloween? Guys, take the floor on this one. What do you say?
I love it.
Really? Oh, go for it. Oh, we got two.
I'm with you, Neil.
and I understand it. I mean, I am so all over the place when it comes to like, what is my opinion on remakes in general? It's like, why do you need to remake a film? I've already seen it, right? And when it comes to Rob Zombie's Halloween, I mean, I understand why people don't like it, because, first of all, it's a Rob Zombie film, which just, a lot of people just don't like Rob Zombie. I do. I mean, House of a Thousand Corpses is one of my favorite movies of all time. I love that film. So, I mean, I was obviously going to go, see Rob Zombie's Halloween. And I like the character development of young Michael at the beginning of it, or the first half of it. I mean, it does go on for a while. I mean, I liked seeing that. I mean, did we need it? No. I mean, 78 stands on its own. It didn't need to be remade. But if you're going to do a remake, I mean, at least do something different. And that's what he did. And of course, other than, I guess, maybe Halloween Kills, I mean, it's one of the most violent Michael Myers we've ever seen on screen. So obviously I like that as well.
But he was sympathetic too. And I think that's the thing. In the first one, at least, he was sympathetic because you saw him as a child. I'm with you. Like the first half of the Halloween remake, I think is really, that should have been the whole movie. I thought that would have been more. And when it gets into the actual remake part, that's when I think it lowers a little bit. I think Halloween 2, Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 is one of those movies that everybody hates. But I actually kind of like. I think there's something to it. Like he was trying something different, which I'm all for. I don't care if it turns out bad, that's fine. Just show me something different, because there's so many, like, everybody liked the 2018 Halloween. I couldn't stand it. I've tried to go back and rewatch it. I'm just like, I don't get in. I can't get into this. I don't care. It's just silly. Like, why is Laurie Strode now some crazy cat lady pissing in a jar? Like, she's like, and they took away all the trauma that would lead somebody to that. They're like, oh, it just happened that one night. Forget about part 2 and all the hospital stuff. It's like seriously, I don't know. But like, Halloween Ends, everybody doesn't like, but I like the fact that they tried something different. Like, they were like, okay, we're going to take this character, we're going to move over here, we're going to do this, and this. And I appreciate that. But Rob Zombie, I've always been a huge Rob Zombie fan. Devil's Rejects is probably my favorite film of the last 20 years in general. I just thought it was like, I remember one of the greatest theater experiences of my life. Went to see it on opening night.
I don't even consider Devil's Rejects a horror movie. That's a fucking Western. I mean, it's a Sam Peckinpah Western. It's
everything rolled into one. You got, and it's like, here I am. I was probably 16, 17 years old at the time, sitting in this theater, packed theater, watching the Devil's Rejects, and everything is working. People are having a fucking party in this theater watching this movie. Every joke, every kill is like every range of emotion. And, then it comes to the perfect ending, the climax with the Leonard Skinner. It's just like, okay, this was the perfect fucking film. Like, that was it. So ever since then, I've been a Rob Zombie fan. So I'm a bit of an apologist about Rob Zombie, and some, like, even the Munsters, I was like, there's something fun, I guess, about this. But the thing with Rob Zombie is, Rob Zombie to me is like Fulci. It's like, whether it's a good film, whether it's a bad film, when you watch it, you know that it's a Rob Zombie film, just like you know that it's a Fulci film when you watch it. He has a style, he has his own way of looking at the world, he has his own way of building the world inside of the movie, and I'm all for that. I'd rather watch that 100 times over than watch your cookie cutter, by the numbers fucking horror movie. 100 times out of 100, I'd rather watch that. Anyway.
What do you think, Justin? Are you a fan of the Rob Zombie Halloween?
Believe it or not, I've seen both of those. Like, he had 2 of them, right? Yeah, I've seen both of those one time, and it's not that I love it or hate it. It's just one of those movies I've seen. We all have those movies. I've seen them. I don't have. Years ago, when Michael Jackson passed away, a coworker was like, "Oh, name somebody who's more talented than Michael Jackson." Anybody. Nobody's more talented than Michael Jackson. And my response was Rob Zombie. I was like, Michael Jackson has never directed a film. He's never directed a movie, a music video. He doesn't play instrument. Rob Zombie plays an instrument. Rob Zombie's an animator. I was like, would you like me to continue? Henry Rollins. I mean, it's like, yeah. So, I mean, I was listening to Joe Dante's podcast, The Movies That Made Me. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of that.
Yeah, sure.
And he had Jello Biafra. Yeah, he had Jello Biafra on. Jello Biafra being the singer from the Dead Kennedys. And I almost fell out of my chair because I couldn't believe this was coming out of Jello Biafra's mouth. And he kind of said the same thing. He's like, I think the most talented filmmaker right now out there, or as talented person out there right now, is Rob Zombie. And he listed off everything. And I don't listen to Rob Zombie's solo music. I like White Zombie, but I like when they sounded like Sonic Youth and not like the heavy metal incarnation, like Soul Crusher and whatnot. And so I know there's like, it drives me nuts on especially on social media, the bitching and moaning about Halloween movies. It's like, my attitude, I heard Stephen King say it years ago, and so I kind of adopted it as well. Is like, you know what? Even a shitty horror movie is still a great fucking movie, And so I his Halloween movies are better than any fucking Halloween movie I can make. So,
They're better than
If I
most
made-
of the sequels. So
yeah,
mean-
that's right. Except for 3. Halloween 3, in my opinion, is
oh yeah.
Yeah, I
Have
agree.
y'all seen how much that steel book is going for Halloween 3? They want like $80 for it.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, not out of print, brand new. It just came out,
Lord.
and it's like $80.
That's odd. I don't know.
Surprising.
And
I mean,
I don't even know if it's a 4K.
It's not even a 4K. That's so odd.
It may not be. I mean, well, I just saw the price, and I was like, no.
Yeah, no, that's crazy.
If I look at it for more than 5 seconds, I'll buy it. No.
Yeah. My quick thoughts. I'd agree with all of you. I really like Rob Zombie. His Halloween, I'm like right on with Alpha. The first half of it I think is solid, and then it just falls apart when it's trying to remake the Carpenter movie. But I'd agree with Justin when he says I'm just sick to death of the Halloween talk. But like I remember at the time when that came out, man, that was like everyone was talking about that movie. It was such a big deal when that came out, and then it definitely did polarize people. But I'm with you. I would take that over the last 3 any day of the week, twice on Sunday. I'm good with that. Like at least he brought something of his own to it. I agree. It wasn't cookie cutter at all, and I think he bringing the exploitation style, at least from that world of a House of a Thousand Corpses and a Rejects, and like he really said Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I think that was the remake that he most likely should have been chosen to do, but I guess in a parallel world maybe he did, and in this world he did Halloween, and it just didn't work on that same level as the Carpenter film, and I don't know if anything really ever could have. That's the thing.
He was supposed to remake The Blob at one point.
Yeah, I remember hearing that.
Yeah, didn't happen though. I know. Yeah, it's a shame because like I like Lords of Salem okay, but like man, some of like 31 I didn't care for. The Munster, I feel like he's fallen a little bit. I still like the guy, and I like that especially he doesn't give a shit. Like that's what I like about him. He does not give a shit what you think about him.
I think the unfortunate thing with Rob Zombie, I feel like he feels like he has to live up to the Devil's Rejects at this point, because I feel like he's the kind of guy that hears the rumblings of people like, oh, fuck those Halloween movies, and he tried the Lords of Salem, which I love. Lords of Salem, I think that's a highly underrated movie in general, and it didn't perform really, I don't think, the way that he was hoping it would. And then after that, it just seemed like 31, 3 from Hell, it was like he was trying to recapture that magic that he captured with the Devil's Rejects, and it just didn't hit on all cylinders for me, either one of those movies.
Yeah.
I think Lords of Salem is
3 from Hell was a disappointment for sure.
Yeah. Just a stupid concept because the ending of the Devil's Rejects is pretty final. But they're just like, oh no, it was just a bunch of flesh wounds. They're fine, It's like they're still alive.
I always loved at conventions, the 3 of them on a panel, like Sid Haig and Mosley and Sherry Moon. They were like, we can't do a sequel because, and they all at the same time say, because we're fucking dead. They did it anyway. They did the sequel anyway, and I don't know. I agree with you. I think Rob Zombie's kind of fallen a little bit.
I think Lords of Salem. I lost my train of thought. When
Hell?
Halloween, what's that?
I was gonna help. I said 3 from Hell. I don't know.
Yeah, I think when Halloween Ends came out, though, I saw a tweet. It's funny as hell that it was the day after Halloween Ends came out. I saw a tweet that somebody reposted on Instagram or Facebook that said, "This country owes Rob Zombie a big apology."
So it's.
I kind of agree with that. The Invisible Man was an interesting but good remake, if you can call it a remake. That was okay one, and The Crazies is a good one. Although I know me and Alpha, we covered that on one of his. I didn't like that one too much.
I love Romero too much to like watch a remake. Unbiased.
I want to see a remake of There's Always Vanilla. Is that that's the comedy he did?
Alpha loves that one.
Yes, I love There's Always Vanilla. I would be down for a remake of that. He always wanted to remake Season of the Witch, so but George never really gave a shit about either one of those movies, so I don't think he would care either way if it ever got remade or not.
And movies ever called Season of the Witch never sell. Like Romero's Season of the Witch didn't sell. Halloween 3 Season of the Witch didn't sell, and then the Season of the Witch with was
Nicolas Cage.
That didn't sell either. So that's a death title. Like you're not.
Oh, Jack's Wife. It'd be all right.
Yeah. Call Jack's Wife.
Try that.
Hungry Wives. It'll sell.
Yeah.
It'll sell like hotcakes. All right, let's get my topic here. Hypothetical. Let's say you're an up-and-coming director and you're getting a chance to direct a big-budget picture. And the studio comes to you. They say Neil. They say Justin. They say Alpha. You could pick one of these 4 awesome actors to be the lead of your film. Who are you picking and why? I got Bill Paxton, Tony Todd, Lon Chaney Jr., and Udo Kier. Which one of those 4 guys, if you were making a big-budget Hollywood horror movie and you could work with one of them as the lead, who are you picking and why? We got Paxton, Todd, Chaney, Kier.
Udo Kier.
Oh, hell yeah. Tell me why.
Because I've always said I want to make a movie with Udo Kier and Udo Dirkschneider from the lead singer of the band Accept, like a road movie.
The wall.
And it's called Duo.
He's already had
Please
this planned
go
out.
on. Please do not stop.
And
I need
so
to hear about
it's
this.
like a Bing Crosby, Bob Hope road movie with those 2 guys called Duo, which is an anagram of their name. But well,
That's amazing. I love
it's
that.
amazing that you mentioned that because that's like I've been saying that for the past 20
He's
years.
had this planned for years. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's my big budget, but it has to be a horror movie. So, yeah.
Tuato, Bill Paxton. Somebody said Jim Carrey. That's awesome. And like I love Udo in anything. Like I'm huge on Udo in Flesh for Frankenstein. I think he's so great in that movie. It's
Mark
insane.
of the Devil is without a doubt my favorite horror film. I mean, it's just, I mean, if not one of them, I mean, it's definitely my top 10 films of all time, but definitely my favorite horror film. I had all throughout high school, I had a Mark of the Devil poster that the video store was taking down, and I just asked them if I can have it. And they're like, yeah, it was all beat up. It was beat to shit, but yeah.
Okay, so Udo Kier road movie. That sounds awesome. What do you guys got, Neil and Alpha? Who you got?
I'm going with Udo Kier myself.
Oh,
it's Udo Kier fan club night, guys.
I mean, I'll tell you why. I mean, when you think about, like all the people that you have ever seen, in a horror movie or just movies in general, I mean, Udo Kier could be in the Wizard of Oz and turn that into a horror movie, just acting out one of the characters. I mean, he is that fucking creepy. I mean, it's just the way that he looks and the way that he moves and acts. I mean, it just creeps me out every time I see him. And if I had to sit down and write a movie script, I mean, I've got a twisted mind. I'm not going to lie to you. And I think he could sell what I would be writing. I don't know what it would be about.
He could keep up with it,
but he would be able to do it. No problem. So, but if he's unavailable, I'm taking Tony Todd because I love Tony Todd.
can't go wrong. I don't think you can go wrong with any of them. What about you, Alpha?
No,
Who you
not
got?
I guess you said Lon Chaney, right?
Lon Chaney Jr. Yes, sir. He was one of the options.
Yeah, I'll take Lon Chaney Jr., one of the greatest actors in horror history. Like, oh yeah, I'll put him in my horror. I'm sure I can find something for him to do. But I mean, all these is interesting.
He was a very sober fellow.
Yeah, Tony Todd's a good one. Tony Todd, just Candyman alone, just his performance in that's fantastic. But I've always loved anything Tony Todd was in. Night of the Living Dead 90. I mean, he was great in that. Bill Paxton. Why Bill Paxton? That's an interesting choice.
Why not Bill Paxton? He's been
I don't know.
He's been killed by aliens.
That's true. Yeah, he was killed by the Terminator. You know,
he directed Frailty. I think he's underrated, man. I love Bill Paxton.
I love him in True Lies. I love his little sleazy character in True Lies. I don't know. That's just what I think of when I think of Bill Paxton. Out of everything, it's just him driving that car, talking about, you know, well, what's the line? Got an ass like a 13-year-old boy or something like that.
What are some of your favorite Lon Chaney performances? I got to hear this.
I
got a weird one. Mine would be Spider Baby. I think Spider Baby's his best role. I love him in that movie.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. And that has Sid Haig in it. Talking about Devil's Rejects.
Yeah,
I kind of forgot he was in that one.
Yeah, have you seen the live television movie from the 50s of Frankenstein with Lon Chaney as Frankenstein's monster,
I have not.
Mm-mm.
where he
Sounds
was
fun,
drunk.
though.
He was drunk, and he was
No.
obviously drunk playing the monster. I mean, his stumbling around and like he walked through a wall. He was so drunk.
He struggled really bad, I think, with alcoholism like his entire life.
He had like there was one scene when they went to a commercial and came back. There was one scene they laid like a cabinet or something down on the floor, and he just laid next to it and put his arm on it. And they shot the scene from above. That's how drunk he was. You can find it on YouTube.
Oh, I've got to see this
Classic.
now for sure.
gotta
That's
check that
the next Lon Chaney movie I'm watching. I'll put it to you that way. But what do you got, Alpha? What other ones?
I don't know. I'm blanking right now. Name some.
Wolfman.
Yeah.
His most like coveted role for sure.
Yeah.
I believe he played in one of the later Frankenstein sequels. I forget if it was not the 50s TV movie that Justin's talking about, but it might have been Ghost of Frankenstein, where he did play the monster in that. And I don't know if he was drunk in that movie. I have no idea, but now I sort of want to see.
He probably was.
Yeah, it might have been.
He was drunk and Bela Lugosi was high. So
I was thinking, say, wasn't Bela Lugosi a heroin addict?
Oh yeah.
That's sad, man. Like all these like great like universal monster icons, and they were like addicted to alcohol, hardcore drugs, and shit like that.
Yeah.
It's a shame. I would say for mine though, I would pick Tony Todd just because of I wish that's the one guy I wish he had more like lead performances. Like I agree with like I love Night of the Living Dead 90. I think he's great in that. I love just his presence in the Final Destination movies. I think he's always so fun as blow. I'll see you soon. And you can't cheat death. Like all the just like the times you see him, he's always chilling but charming at the same time. And like to me, the performance as Daniel Robitaille, the Candyman, it's just one of the best like screen presence performances ever. He just really commands and owns that role. Be my victim. Just so good, man. I think Tony Todd is just money. And he's one of those guys I feel like he's always the side. Like, oh, here's a cameo. Here's a brief scene. I want Tony throughout the whole goddamn thing. Like, I wish he had more roles like that. So if I'm getting that big budget, big role, big movie, I would totally choose Tony Todd. But I don't think you can go wrong with any of the options.
I mean, he was the highlight of the Hatchet movies, wasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, there wasn't too many for me.
If anything it was Tony Todd.
Yes.
Yeah.
Internet Eric said, "Hey, Internet Eric here says I just saw Udo in Puppet Master." Okay, we got Cal L Daily checking in, saying, "Hey, everyone, hope all is well." We want Udo as the Tin Man. Hell yeah, that's the Wizard of Oz with Udo Kier. I mean, Jesus Christ, you can't beat that. Dudo was in Brawl in Cell Block 99. Tony Todd was in Platoon. Great actor. Love Tony Todd. Tony Todd appearance in Hellfest. Okay. Favorite Paxton roles Near Dark.
That's a good one.
What are we talking about? Right? Absolutely. Okay. Take George C. Scott in anything. Okay. We got Russ checking in. Okay. Grande, Neil, Alfred, Justin, Chris, and chat. Hey, buddy. Yeah, no. So that was my topic. Neil, what do you got for us, brother?
All right. Let's see. I'm going to pick one of my original questions. And this kind of ties in a little bit too with Alpha's question. So this is just a general, just what do you think? And it's kind of inspired by just, the state of horror at the moment. It seems like, any film that comes out now, if it's not part of a franchise, people just don't go see it. They're like, hey, I'm going to wait for it to come on Netflix or whatever. So the question is, franchises, sequels, remakes in general, do you think that they help or hurt horror as a whole?
I think it helps. I think it doesn't have to be quality, but it's, it keeps the genre going. It's kind of like, I don't like superhero movies at all or comic book movies. Like I couldn't give two shits about any of those movies, but I do appreciate the fact that they need to exist just if anything to keep theaters open. That's what we're kind of banking on them making the big blockbuster money so we can still go to the theater to see our little weird ass movies that we want to go see, because if those movies aren't making money, then Ari Aster is not going to make any money either. You know what I mean? So it's the same way. It's like if Scream 7 is a huge hit, then studios are going to fork over money to produce other horror films. They're going to take chances on other horror films. So every now and then, if they want to throw out a remake or a sequel or whatever, it's like I'm probably not going to watch it or care, but a lot of people will, and that'll keep the horror genre going. I mean, that's just it's you got to take the good with the bad, I guess, is the way I look at it.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, I'm in line with that too. I mean, you need Scream 7 in order to have Late Night with the Devil, because the hope is maybe we can turn this into a franchise, or Immaculate. Some of the, my son, he pretty much goes and watches every new horror movie that comes out in a theater. He'll go see it. Sometimes he'll travel, miles, a huge distance to go see it. Like he did with Late Night with the Devil, or Satanic Hispanics. He did the same with that too. I mean, and you go to these small little theaters that are playing it, and we live in a city. We live in Seattle, but yet the multiplexes are full of all the big releases. It used to be, if you lived in a big city, that's where you saw Late Night with the Devil or Satanic Hispanics. Now you got to travel to a small theater in some little town, because they're the only ones who have it. Like when Wolf Cop 2 came out, the nearest theater playing it was in another state, 300 miles away, which would have never happened 30 years ago. So, I think, so if going to your question, if anything, that's the issue I have with the big blockbuster franchises, that they're hogging up the theater space. They're opening in, thousands of theater, I don't, hundreds of thousands of theaters on Friday opening weekend, playing in 2 or 3 theaters in a multiplex. And that's taking up space that a smaller movie would have. And small movie theaters, unless you live in Los Angeles or New York, they're just a thing of the past.
It's true.
So
that's true. Yeah, I would take that even a step further than that too, and say that not only does it hog up the space in theaters, it hogs up the internet attention as well.
Yeah.
Like, Late Night with the Devil, it seems like it's a big
that got a lot of internet attention.
Yeah, definitely. That one did, for sure. There's no doubt about it. And like right now, I would say this year for horror has been mostly original. I mean, we've seen, we go studio by studio. We had the Night Swim, which everybody pretty much hated. We had the Imaginary, pretty much everybody hated. We have Neon releasing Immaculate. We have Stop Motion from Shudder, and Late Night with the Devil from Shudder. It seems like we have so far been getting like original content, and like I do see buzz on, obviously, because I'm a horror YouTuber, from pages I follow and stuff, reviewing this stuff, but you don't really see it from the mainstream. It doesn't seem to catch garner the attention of the mainstream. That seems to obviously be reserved for Marvel movies, comic book movies, and these franchise horror movies that, okay, we're just waiting on Scream 7 to come out and save us so we can, make these smaller independent movies like Alpha was saying. So I don't know. I hate that it kind of grabs away the attention. I almost wish organically, via word of mouth, one of these movies could just get over to the point where, like that's all we're talking about. We're forgetting about the sequels. They're in the background, and these movies can now be in the foreground. It just seems like it's so hard to do that, though, especially in a day and age where everyone has their 2 cents. Like the internet is such a double-edged sword, where I can come on and be like, oh, this horror movie, it's getting all this hype. I hated it, blah, 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 and then it's just becomes this big polarizing thing, and it becomes an argument as opposed to like a discussion. And I don't know, that's a big thing. Like I always said I didn't like Hereditary, and I know Alpha's mentioned it in Ari Aster. That's a big, I feel like I'm a hypocrite. I'm like, God damn it, I shouldn't have come on here and buried this. We should just embrace something new and move on. I think horror really is desperately looking for that next movie to move us on, like we go, movie by movie that's done that. Look at Scream in 96, moved it ahead. Blair Witch in 99 made it scary again. Saw ushered in all of these torture ripoffs, and then Paranormal Activity, whether you like or hate those movies, It made a lot of buzz. It struck a nerve. I don't feel like we've had that movie in a long time. I think horror is desperately wanting that next big movie to move us ahead. And I just don't know, man. I don't know. It's not going to be any of these sequels or reboots. It's not. It's going to be
I don't think that next big movie is going to happen. I think when you look at where we're headed in terms of streaming and AI and technology, we're all living in our own little bubbles now. Like right now, what we're doing, a conversation that we're having, what we're talking about, there's a small segment of people who this is where they're at tonight. They could be watching something on CBS or Singing with the Stars or whatever the hell those shows are, but they decided to come here to watch this, to hear our opinion. We're nobody. Who the fuck are we? But we're all in our own little echo chambers now. We're our own little bubbles. Nothing is mainstream anymore. People have conversations about things that they're like, oh, this is everything to me. And I'm like, I have never heard of anything you're talking about. And then I could have a conversation about something that's everything to me, and nobody else knows what the fuck I'm talking about. So I think honestly, right now we're in in my opinion, we're in a really good spot in terms of like where we're at with horror films and filmmaking in general, because there's so many outlets now. Like, yeah, you got, Shudder and all these streaming outlets where these little movies that would never have gotten seen 20, 30 years ago, everything that was like direct to video back in the day is, what we called it. Everything that was direct to video now is now direct to streaming or whatnot. So I don't think we're going to have that big, like, this is a huge hit movie that's going to change the direction thing. I think everybody's going in their own directions and doing their own things. It's like, 1 week you can watch something like Infinity Pool and be like, what the fuck did I just watch? Then you'll watch something, Ari Aster or something. And it's like, I'll watch Beau is Afraid in the theater one weekend, and the next weekend I'll go and watch Scream 6 or something. It's like completely different shit, but it's like that stuff's getting made. Whereas like it felt like 10, 15 years ago, if it wasn't a remake or a sequel, it didn't get made. Nobody ever saw it. It just didn't happen.
Yeah.
There was a period there, I remember like driving by a movie theater and like everything on the theater, it looked like 1985 again. Like everything in the theater was like shit from 20, 30 years ago. And I was like, but it was all remakes, it was all just remakes of shit from 20, 30 years ago. So yeah, I just don't know if we're going to have that like unifying moment like the Blair Witch or Scream or something where everybody has seen it and everybody's talking about it. I just don't know if we're gonna be there or not ever. I think it's gonna get worse. I think it's gonna be more and more, divided or
See, I'm inclined to disagree only because I think we're in a transitional phase with films right now. Prior to 2020, the only things making money were superhero movies and Blumhouse movies. And now when Blumhouse puts out a movie, it's shit. I mean, I'm not saying it's a shitty movie. It's just, it's not making money, because the quality is diminished. They've gotten into this pattern of remakes, reboots, and the original material they're putting out isn't all that fantastic. Superhero movies aren't making money. I don't, if you remember back to November, I'm old enough to remember that Thanksgiving, that weekend, the movie Thanksgiving, that weekend, Thanksgiving beat Captain Marvel or whatever the Captain Marvel, the Marvels, was that? Is that the name?
Yeah. Whatever you say, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Thanksgiving made
Marvel
more
Man. We'll go with that.
Yeah, the Marvels, the Captain Marvel movie sequel. So, and it is now because it's getting a sequel, but it wasn't a franchise movie. It wasn't it was an original kind of movie because it was not all that original. It was based on Eli Roth's fake trailer, but it was an anticipated movie. And so I kind of have hope that there will be that Blair Witch or that Exorcist or that Jaws, that movie that comes out that everybody imitates because, so you'll get a movie. Eventually a big horror movie will come out and everybody will want to do their own version of
Hollywood's very copycat. It's very monkey see, monkey do. Yeah. I think he makes a good point though in saying that it does seem like everybody's going their own direction. Maybe that's why we haven't had that next organic horror movie to sort of move us along in quite some time. But like I think he's looking at it in a positive light, whereas I don't know. I don't know about that. Like I see it. I think he's right. I think it's going in that direction, but I don't know if I'm happy about that. Like I like the whole like when we come together, and then it's like, what, like, you know, just like a big party at the theater. I liked that personally. I think that whole part of it is just so much fun. But like, if that's gonna just be, you know, it's a smaller, like smaller groups here to enjoy this movie, that movie, and the other movie, I don't know. I don't know if I'm for that, but I guess maybe I'm just old school. Like, I don't know. Like,
But,
what do you think,
you know,
Neil? Do you think that's a good thing it's going in that direction, or a bad thing? Did we lose Neil?
Oh, you were talking to me. Talking to Justin.
yeah, you're the guy named Neil.
Yeah.
Or is that a fake
Last
name
time
like mine?
No, that is my real name.
He's
I
trying to
did
avoid
actually
his
find
coworkers.
somebody. Oh, somebody at work did find my channel one time. They told me about it. I was like, I'm sorry. But anyway, no, I mean, it just seems to me today, you know, like, you know, if it's not part of a franchise that, you know, nobody's talking about it. But we do have, you know, films that are coming out, that have come out, you know, in the past, you know, 6, 7, 8 years, that people have been all over, you know, when they came out, but it seems like the conversations die really quickly. That, you know, something else comes along and, you know, takes all the attention away. And you just don't have, you know, like a Blair Witch Project where people talked about that movie for 10 years after it came out. You know, same thing with, you know, the others. I mean, you're still talking about Scream today. So, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, you know what I'm saying? You just don't have the longevity of any type of discussions except for franchises now, it seems to me, or remakes, you know, yes. The remakes, you know, people go see them. I mean, I'm part of a group that does. I mean, you know, I try to support horror any way I can. If going and sitting through another shitty remake's what it takes, then I guess I'll do it. But I mean, it just, you know, you're right though. It just seems like there's not, you know, anything that is just grabbing people's attention and then taking off with it. It's like, you know, they'll talk about, you know, Late Night with the Devil until Scream 7 comes out. And then that'll be all that you hear about. So I don't know. It's hopefully it is just a transition, and you know we're still waiting for that, you know, that bomb to hit, and you know, start another wave of something that's interesting anyway.
Well, I think it's like an epidemic of like what I call TikTok brain, where like I feel like so much that gets made now is so disposable and forgettable. Like I can't tell you how many movies, shows that I've seen over the past 5 years that even if I liked after it was over, I was like, oh, that's pretty good. Ask me a year, I couldn't tell you a thing about it. Like it just, you know, out of your mind. I just think that there's like a formula that's, I don't know, some kind of formulaic pattern that goes on with a lot of modern films in general that just doesn't stick with people. Like the first time you see Jaws or the first time you see Dawn of the Dead or something, it's like, I want to go back. I want to go watch it again, see if I can see something else. The Shining, you know, those type of movies. It's like, even if a movie is really, really good now, it's like, I rarely ever have the urge to go back and rewatch it. It's just like, oh, that was a fun experience. Now I'm going to move on and watch something else. And then I forget about it. And it's like, oh, I did see that movie. Oh, yeah. What happened in that? It's just,
Yeah, I think a lot of people go through that. Like I remember, I love Cabin in the Woods. Love it. I mean, I saw it in the theater. I absolutely had a ball with it. I still think it's a great movie. And I remember at the time, people, oh, this is a game changer. Like that was a big, like 2 words thrown around about that movie. And now we're 12 years later. Does anybody consider it a game changer still? Like, does anybody really holding on that pedestal still? And it's like, I still really love the movie, but it doesn't feel like it held the same weight or steam that it did then now. And this is only 12 so years later, whereas the movies you mentioned, Shining and, you know, these movies that came out 40 plus years ago, they still do. So yeah, I don't know. You're right. Maybe it is TikTok brain. Maybe it's a whole thing where these movies are fine, but they're just not, you know, they don't have that rewatchability factor, and they don't have that same weight as those other movies are. But, you know, again, throwing in the conversation of those movies, those are all-time classics, so it's hard to.
Yeah, we also got to remember that there was a lot of bad shit made in every year of every decade.
Yeah.
It's like we look at the 80s and you're like, oh man, 1980 we had The Shining and Friday the 13th and, you know, a handful of other, but then there was a whole lot of bad shit in that same year too that you got to wade through. So even though now you look and you're like, man, this year there's been so many shitty movies. It's like this movie sucked, and this movie sucked, and this movie sucked. But this movie was really good. Like, like Maxine's coming out. I'm really excited to see that. There, that's just part of it. It's like there's gonna be a lot of shitty movies, no matter what decade or era that you're in. It's just I guess nostalgia likes to make us think that like, oh man, everything was great in the 80s or everything was great in the 70s. It's like, no, 90% of the stuff that came out in the 70s was pretty shitty. So
Totally. All right. Justin, what do you got for us next, good brother?
Oh man, what time is it? Jeez. All right.
Probably like 1 o'clock by you.
Yeah, 1 o'clock. Yeah. How long have we been doing this? I got to take a pill, guys. Come on. Wow. I was, you guys brought it. So I'm kind of feel like my next one is shitty. My next question is shitty. So I watched, over the weekend, I watched Street Trash and which is being remade. Like, seriously?
why?
Yeah. So, well, it's like Tox Avenger. But I think in the case of the Tox Avenger, maybe one of you guys knows a little more. I had heard that it had something to do with the rights, that Lloyd Kaufman needs to retain the rights, and that's why he's doing it. He's loses the rights if he doesn't remake it. I'm not entirely sure how.
He's also like 90 years old, so it's probably another payday for him.
Yeah, yeah. But anyway, so I watched Street Trash over the weekend, and as a double with talking about Rob Zombie, I keep thinking Devil's Rejects, but as a Devil's Reign, the movie with William Shatner and Ernest Borgnine. And when I was a little kid, the one of the local stations they didn't have a Saturday night horror host show. They showed horror movies on Sunday afternoons. So I was like 8 or 9, and they were showing the Devil's Reign, and they didn't edit anything. So when I was 8, I saw these people, they're melting, their faces are melting, and it just freaked me out. And just the effects, that goopy effects, just so good. And then the following weekend, they showed The Incredible Melting Man, and that just freaked me out as well. So after watching the Devil's Reign and Street Trash, I'm wondering, do folks have like that goopy style? It's like, it's kind of falls in the category of splatter, but not necessarily splatter. It's just that those goopy effects. I've always been fascinated by those, and so I'm wondering, are there any of those out there that people like, other than Street Trash, obviously, and Devil's Reign? That just those effects that people like in RoboCop when the guy gets in the toxic.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
I just love that effect. That effect, and when it's done, you can only do that practically. You can't use CGI.
Yeah.
It's not, Screaming Mad George. Yeah. Because he did, they had goopy effects in
Elm Street 4.
And Screaming Mad George Body Melt. Yeah, didn't Screaming Mad George do the effects for
he did Silent Night, Deadly Night 4 and 5 as well, like the bug creature effects in part 4.
Yeah, no, he did the ones for it was one of the sequels, Children of the Corn sequels.
Oh, did he? I don't. The Children of the Corn sequels run together for me. Society, there you go.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Body Melt is crazy. Ben Grimm says the stuff for goopy horror movies. Yeah. That's a good. I really don't know. Nothing's coming to my head right now.
Like there's the Incredible Melting Man, which is the king of those movies. I mean, Rick Baker, and it's like Rick Baker did that. The guy who makes monkeys and chimpanzees.
I watched one of the bad Cabin Fever sequels, and there was I do remember this scene because it was like the only thing worth a shit in the whole movie, where these two women had the flesh-eating virus. and they were both like trying to get on this jet ski or boat to get out of there. And she was like, "You ain't getting on this." And they just had like this crazy cat fight, but their skin was coming off as they're fighting each other. And it was actually amazing. Like, I was like, holy shit. And it all crescendos with the one bashing the other one in the face with a dildo repeatedly until her face bashes in. I was like, wow, I did not, like, this was not on my bingo card for this fucking movie. Like, holy shit.
Yeah, there's a Brian Yuzna film, it's an anthology film called Necronomicon. From I think it's like 1993. There's one segment in that. It's really, it's just disgusting. The guy's like dripping and falling apart. That's got some really good effects. It's a hard movie to find. You can get, like, if you find a Blu-ray, it's usually the German. It's all region, but it's from Germany. But it's a really well done film. If I remember correctly, the 90s version of Invasion of the Body Snatchers has some goopy effects too.
Evil Connor mentions Poltergeist, the scene with the guy in the mirror.
Yeah, pulling his face off. Yeah.
That's a classic.
Does Raiders of the Lost Ark count?
Yes, that movie. That scene scared. I was a little kid, and that scene scared the living shit out of me. And I saw it in a theater. Like that was so terrifying. And like, if you think about it, I've talked to other horror fans. They like say their gateway, that was like a gateway for them. That movie, Raiders of the Lost Ark, gateway.
Yeah,
to
I've heard that too. Actually, I've heard that too.
And Temple of Doom.
Yeah, Temple of Doom was pretty brutal for PG.
Me and Neil covered Dead Alive on an episode years back.
Dead Alive's a good one.
That's one. I don't know why that didn't come to my brain. That's a classic, like, goopy, like all the effects in that.
Yeah,
is insane.
Yeah. Well, Dead Alive is more just a straight up splatter film,
True.
Yeah, I was going to say that the first thing that came to my mind was Tokyo Gore Police.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I love that movie.
That's right.
And in Itchy the Killer, it's got some of those splatter type scenes in it.
Yeah. So there's quite a few.
Yeah.
Street Trash is the king.
Slither.
Slither's a good one. The Tales of Tarman of the Return of Living Dead is pretty goopy. Okay,
that's right.
The Fly remake, Deep Star 6, Leviathan, some underwater horror movies, The Ruins, Good Body Horror. That was the one where it was like all the plants, like,
yes,
it was like they got infected by plants.
Yeah,
I actually like that movie, The Ruins.
The thing about Slither is that James Gunn, like, people point out, Slither, the plot's very similar to Night of the Creeps, and when it came out, and James Gunn's like, I've never heard of that movie. You must tell me this movie, Night of the Creeps. But then it turns out he wrote a book about working for Lloyd Kaufman where he mentions Night of the Creeps twice.
Oh, caught him red-handed. There's a little bit of Shivers in there. There's a little bit of Shivers in there too.
Yeah,
like Sean Cunningham saying he'd never seen Baba's Bay of Blood before too, right?
Yeah.
Never heard of it.
Bay of who?
What's shish kebab?
Yeah.
Anybody else have goopy horror movies you want to mention before we move on to the next topic?
I'm thinking I've never thought of the term goopy horror film before, so now I'm trying to think, like, what constitutes goopy
There's
horror?
A lot of them. There's a lot of
them.
Now
that I'm seeing in the chat, I'm like, oh yeah, that is pretty goopy. Yep, that's pretty goopy. Yep. Now I'm like, now I'm trying to think, like, fuck, what else is goopy?
The Godzilla versus Hedorah is also pretty good.
Oh my God, it's my favorite Godzilla movie. Without doubt.
It was, I'm assuming Neil and I are close in age, that they used to show a TV version called Godzilla vs. the Smog Monster, which removed all the goop. But
they removed the goop? No.
I don't know if I ever saw that or not.
Now goop free.
That movie, I love that movie
free version.
It's like the director wanted to do, because Godzilla was always like inspired by nuclear and World War and all that, right. And then the Smog Monster was his commentary on pollution. So it was like those two meeting each other. I was like, dude, this is like the fact that someone would think of this like for a Godzilla movie, just so, and the whole thing that the Smog Monster looked like a vagina. And like, it's just so crazy. Oh my God.
Yeah, it looked like a cross between a vagina and Cthulhu. Yeah. Yeah.
The Call of Vagina Cthulhu. Like, amazing movie though. Probably my favorite of that era.
And it's a very 70s movie. You know, it's very 70s. It's
yeah,
like
it has the animation. It has the scene in the nightclub where everyone's wearing like fish masks for some reason, and they're just like, it's almost like a weird giallo. It's like what? We're now in a giallo nightclub. Like what the fuck? Like I love that movie.
Yeah, and it's got that weird yellow submarine animation too. Yeah,
Godzilla flies in it.
Yep.
Weird, fucking weird movie. Should I watch as a kid? But there was Goop. I did not watch a TV edited version. Goop free. That would have sucked.
Yeah. Of course, now that I think about it, I think anything from Stuart Gordon would count, right? I mean, pretty much. Like Reanimator.
He did the Body Snatchers remake. So
Gordon. I mean, Reanimator, all the Reanimator films, From Beyond. Dagon.
Oh, From Beyond. From Beyond.
Dagon's really underrated.
Yeah, but they've got all that. You know, I guess I've always thought of it as just like B movie gore.
Friend of mine,
it's all practical.
Fright Night is goopy. That's right. When the assistant guy there.
I always thought. See, I always had this debate with people too. What was his assistant? Was he a gargoyle, Jerry like Billy Cole? Was that the assistant's name?
Yeah, I think so.
Figure out what the fuck he was. Is he a gargoyle or?
I didn't. A zombie? I thought maybe he was a zombie.
He could go out during the day. He bled green, so he wasn't a vampire. Like, what the fuck was that guy? Like,
he was like whatever Renfield is. You know.
I don't know.
I think that was
yeah.
It's like Stand By Me has the what the hell is Goofy scene. I need my the horror Stand By Me. What the fuck was Billy Cole? What was that guy? Like what? I always said gargoyle, but my friends are like, no.
Yeah, and I hate to admit it, I probably haven't seen Fright Night in 15 years, so I don't really.
Remember. Wow. I think
I just got the 4K for it though, so I'm going to watch it soon. So.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I hadn't seen it. I probably hadn't seen that movie in 25 years. When I was a kid, that was like one of my go-to horror movies was Fright Night. Loved Fright Night. Me and my cousin grew up on it. Hadn't probably seen it in 25 years until I did pick up that 4K. It was a steelbook at Walmart, I think. And I was like, I got to pick this up and watch it. It's just been so long. Man, it's such a good movie, though. It's so good. It's one of those that really holds up.
Liking it, and everybody talks about it, so I guess they can't be wrong.
It works. I don't know how to explain it. It still works as well because it used to scare the shit out of me when I was a kid, and still like even the scene. What it does, I was thinking about this last night actually for some reason. What it does well is like, do you remember when you were a kid? One of the scariest things you could do was look out your window at night.
Sure.
It kind of captures that, like when he looks out the window and across the street and he sees the vampire. Like when I was a kid, like I was terrified to look out because you didn't know what the fuck was going to be out there. I don't know, my imagination would run wild. I don't know. It's like, oh, somebody standing out there staring at me. Is somebody peeping in my windows? I don't know. I just think that movie does a great job of that. I don't know.
It's a masterpiece. I think the music in it is so good. Like just oh my God, the score and that scene in the nightclub where it's just so magical, where he's like dancing with her and she doesn't see the reflection. And I just think that's like an 80s. To me, that's arguably the best horror movie of that year, which was one of the best. I mean, 85 for horror is tough to beat for me. But yeah, definitely the goopy stuff with Billy Cole. Can't
the word of the night for me, goopy. I'm gonna be thinking about that all night. I'm gonna be like, what else is goopy? I'm gonna be like, oh, that's a goopy horror movie.
Grande's Goopy Graveyard. It fits
right
in. That's what it is. Alpha, buddy, what you got? What's the next topic you got for us, buddy? He's frozen.
I think say he is frozen in time.
Am I here?
Frozen.
There
Am I alive?
We're back now. Okay.
All right. What's up?
I'll be right back, but I can still hear y'all.
Okay. Were y'all shooting at me for something?
Yeah, I was saying next topic for you, good brother.
Sorry, yeah, everything froze up on my screen for a second, so I couldn't hear anything. This is an interesting one because I was watching Dana, Evil Dead chick, was talking about this on her stream last night before, about Wes Craven's New Nightmare. I think that's a really interesting film. I think the concept of the movie is really, really a good, interesting concept. I just think that the execution was lacking. So I was just wanting to throw this out there. What would be, can you think of any other movies that concept was a 10, but the execution was lackluster, like a 5. Like if this movie, like almost like if I could redo this movie and tweak things here and there, it would make it what it could be fully. Um, my idea, I know, Grande, this is for you. I want to see if this would, because I know you hate, I know you haven't been a big fan of the last 2 Scream films.
No.
Am I correct about that? Okay.
Yes.
But I was thinking about this because, listening to Dana and talk about New Nightmare and all that. How would you feel if they did, let's say, Scream 7, they take the New Nightmare concept and put it into the Scream films? Because I think I'm with you. I think the Scream films have gone about as far as they could go with whatever storyline that they're trying to pull. Like, I felt like it was pretty much done. Like, I was pretty much good with it after the first one, but at this point, it's like gone way too fucking far. But I think if there was ever a franchise or a movie that would benefit from that, bringing it into reality type of thing, where, New Nightmare was about Heather Langenkamp and not Nancy, and they bring in Wes Craven and all this other stuff and then bring it into reality. I think the perfect movie for that concept would be a Scream movie. So you can bring back Nev Campbell and you can bring back everybody that's already dead in the series, but you can bring back all the stars, the people that people want to pay to see, like Matthew Lillard and Skeet Ulrich, bring them all back in, but then just have a killer killing off the stars of the Scream franchise. Would you be interested in watching a Scream film if it were that type of concept?
I think that's brilliant. I think that's I really do. I think that's the only direction you could go with those movies.
It's
And
the perfect franchise to do it because the Scream film itself is kind of already halfway there, because Wes Craven, New Nightmare was kind of Wes Craven testing the waters to see if a type of film like that would work.
And that was after a Dream Child. That was after Freddy's Dead and the bad 3D gimmick, and that it was dead. It was the dead horse had been beaten beyond recognition, and that's when they pulled that card. And I thought that was the only way to do it at that time. I think that's a great idea, number one, because all the conventions now, it's just it's the Scream people. It's all that it is. Oh, come meet Nev Campbell, pay Skeet Ulrich and Melissa Barrera $150 to take a picture with mother and son. And that's all it's become. It's just become okay, we milk that cash cow. We want your money. Come take a 5-second photo with us, and you can tell all your friends that we took a photo together. That's what it's become. If I'll tell you what, Alpha, I'll sign up for that movie. It has to take place at a convention. Like they're all, hey, Nev, hey. You could bring Jamie Kennedy's character back, and we're back at a convention. So good to see you. Let's get dinner later. And then they get picked off one by one. I think you should start on that script, man.
And the first one to go is Drew Barrymore. You bring back Drew Barrymore to get killed off in the first 10 minutes again.
As long as it would end her shitty talk show, yeah.
You can just incorporate that. Yeah,
you can start on her shitty talk show.
Yeah, and she's like walking, she's like, these motherfuckers, whatever. But then she gets a call on her cell phone, and then it starts all over again. But then and you can incorporate all the weird hardcore Scream fans at the conventions, and it's like, is it one of these people? Then it could turn out to be one of the cast members who's lost their mind because Scream has taken over their entire life and career, like Skeet Ulrich. Let's be honest. I think it could work. I'd say that's the movie I want to see. What is, throwing it around the table here, what is a movie concept that didn't work originally, but you think would work for some other type of movie or franchise? I guess what I'm trying to say.
I got one, but do you guys want to take this first, Neil or Justin?
Well, I'm drawing a blank, so go ahead.
Yeah, same. The idea of the convention, though, I had an idea if they ever remade the movie Target. You ever see that movie?
I have not.
It's Peter Bogdanovich's first movie. He did for Roger Corman with not with Lon Chaney. Why is Lon Chaney's name coming? The original Frankenstein.
Boris
Karloff.
Boris.
He this is what happens when you get old.
I know.
You're like, you think Lon Chaney, but it's Boris Karloff. Boris Karloff is this. He's this. He's playing Boris Karloff. Basically, he's this older guy that he, older actor that's thinking about giving up acting for good, going back to England. He only made, he makes horror movies. He's appearing in Roger Corman movies and whatnot. And he's doing appearances at drive-ins these days. And it's him and his assistant. And he's just pontificating about life and whatnot as it goes on. But the other side of the plot is there's a mass shooter going around Los Angeles, picking people off at random. Then he shows up at a drive-in and the two storylines collide. And it's a really, really good film, really wonderful film. I mean, it's a horror film for sure. But when it came out, it was a flop, and people were like, "That's absurd! A mass shooter?" Because it came out in 1968, and they're like, "Mass shooter? What the hell?"
Before it was popular.
Somebody's not going to go. Yeah, before it was popular, before all the kids were doing it.
Yeah.
So before, yeah. So it wasn't it was a kind of a flop, and it was kind of laughed at, and it's gained attention.
Wow.
Obviously in recent years because of the plot. So if they were to redo it, I think it would be great to grab like someone like Jamie Lee Curtis in the Boris Karloff role, and the mass shooter is at a horror convention, so I guess it goes into that poorly executed. It was poorly executed for the time because they didn't have mass shooters in 1968. The idea was absurd. And so targets would probably be, if anything, more ripe for a remake than because of the way it was executed, since they didn't have anything, since Peter Bogdanovich, who wrote the movie, didn't have anything to draw from. He kind of, and it's got like, if you've seen Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Quentin Tarantino admits to taking inspiration from it, where Cliff Booth is driving around listening to the music nonstop whenever they're in a car listening to music. Well, the guy who's the mass shooter is listening to the radio the whole time, like just different cuts throughout as he drives through LA. But it's a really well done film. So I guess it would kind of fall into that. It was poorly executed just because of the circumstances that it came out in, when there was no such thing as mass shootings back then.
That sounds like one I'd want to see, though.
I want to check that one out.
Yeah,
Targets. Yeah, it's one of those movies that I don't think ever. It hasn't gotten to like there is a Blu-ray, but it's not a spectacular Vinegar Syndrome $60,
pretty box
special edition slip cover.
Yeah. It's not one of those. It's just got a, it's put out on Blu-ray. It may be Scream Factory because it's Corman, but it didn't get some kind of glorious. And I'm sure there's other companies that have it on. I'm sure you can find it on Blu-ray for less than $15.
Sure. Yeah. The one I was thinking of that comes to mind first and foremost is the Babadook, because I do think you had a really great concept there, like the whole, like the children's storybook and the mother-son dynamic with the father being out of the picture. And the entire movie is a big criticism on, or I guess message on how everyone deals with grief differently. And in this movie, it's dealt with. It's a very great idea. And I think Jennifer Kent did do a good job in the director's chair, but I felt as from the writing aspect of it, there was so much more that could have been there. That movie suffers terribly from an annoying child screaming its head off throughout the entire thing, to the point where it could ruin the movie. It pretty much hurt the movie for me, and how drawn out it got towards the end. I was like, man, like in the hands of somebody else, I think this could have been a home run. I really do. Now, it could have been a strikeout as well in the hands of somebody else. I'm not here to say that anybody else could have made it great. But since we mentioned Wes, I always thought Wes would be the guy that could just nail this. I think his psychology for horror, he made a lot of underrated movies that had interesting themes. Like People Under the Stairs is a pretty deep movie that, at the time it was a modest hit, but I always thought that movie was so much smarter than people gave it credit for and what it had to say. And I really think that he would have nailed a topic like the Babadook. I think he would have just made it more personal, more mother-son relationship. And I think he would have handled the grief better. I don't know. I think Wes Craven's The Babadook would have been very interesting to see, but that would be my pick for one that
his movie Red Eye proved that he's a good director. Like he
is, man. Wes is underrated. I think Wes was great. Granted, by the time she's making the Babadook, he was making like My Soul to Take, which Like, he had fallen off the train, unfortunately. But I think prime Wes Craven, I think he hits a home run with the Babadook personally.
Yeah. Cillian Murphy just said that Red Eye was a B movie.
Really?
Yeah.
I guess he won an
He's
Oscar.
a serious actor.
Yeah.
Yeah. Apparently it's beneath
The guy
him
who
now.
started out in 28 Days Later.
Yeah.
His first acting role was in 28
That
Days
was
Later.
Scarecrow for like 5 minutes throughout that entire trilogy of Nolan Batman movies.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, that was Scarecrow. Bro, you were barely in it. Like, oh,
Yeah.
horrible. You got any, Neil? Any that come to you?
I don't know. The first thing that popped in my head, and I'm afraid it would still be a bad movie, was to see if anybody could do a better job with Jason Goes to Hell.
I would say, yeah. I think anybody could do a better job with that.
That would be interesting.
I mean, I've always kind of liked the concept behind it, but just as a Friday the 13th film, it just didn't work.
I agree.
I would agree with that too. It was 8 movies of them doing the same thing when they finally, oh, now he has a sister, and now there's a magical sword, and now there's the Duke that is saying all these random lines and breaking people's fingers for information. Like, oh God, I hate that movie so bad. Oh my God. Zombie Crease had a question for us, and I also think Ben Grimm had a question for us that I'm going to try to find too. But we could run through this one quick before we do the next topic. Favorite horror film and favorite film.
For me, it's the same film, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 1974.
Hell yeah.
I said it earlier, Mark of the Devil would be my favorite horror film. And then favorite film, I just mentioned it. It's a newer one, but I think Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It's not only Quentin Tarantino's best film, it's probably one of the best movies ever made. I mean, it's just you try and find something wrong with the movie, you can't. I do. I can't find.
I love the hell out of it. I saw it in the theater, so yeah.
Yeah, and it's one of those. I think it was Alfa Romero mentioned, going back to the movie theater twice. I saw it in the movie theater 3 times. I went back to the movie 3 times to watch it again. I mean,
that's a good. That one's one. I love all of Tarantino's films, but that's one that I think about more than any here lately. Like
that.
Anytime it's on, like I'm just like, hey, I gotta watch this.
That scene when Cliff Booth goes to Spawn Ranch, like you're just terrified for Cliff, because you realize Cliff isn't important to the plot. He's not, at that point, and so you're like, they're gonna kill Cliff off here at Spawn Ranch, and it's almost like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, just the way it's shot and filmed. It just has this eerie mood, and then you just go back into the, and go back into that where he's punching the shit out of the hippie. He's like, ladies, it's like,
yeah, especially that first time you see it, because after you've seen it, you kind of realize Quentin Tarantino was kind of living vicariously. It was just like, okay, here's this badass Hollywood stuntman beating the shit out of all these nerdy, smelly, shitty hippies.
Yeah.
But at the time, we're thinking like, oh, family, they're gonna kill him or something. But it's like, no, they're all just a bunch of morons on fucking acid or something.
Yeah.
Like, It's so good. It's so good. My answer would be Children of the Living Dead. No, I'm joking.
Isn't that the Savini movie? Like,
he's in it for the first 10 minutes. Yeah, he's in it for the first 10 minutes, and then
and he's all like ripped and like beating the shit out of it.
Yeah. And then he kill him off in the movie.
That from Blockbuster, like, oh, she's like 25 years ago, maybe more.
I'm sorry. Sorry you went through that. But no, Dawn of the Dead for both. Yeah,
that's me too.
You know this, Zombie Grease. You know this.
Yeah, Zombie Grease got to know that. Ben Grimm asked, before we move on to the next topic, what are a few modern horror movies last 10 years that you think will be talked about as a classic 40 years from now? Do you think, if there's any?
Lords of Salem. I think Lords of Salem will be the Halloween 3 for like my son's generation. The movie that didn't get a lot of love when it came out, but
I teased the movie a lot, but Hereditary, it really struck a nerve with a majority, and that movie will be talked about when I'm fucking gray. Like I know it will. It definitely, I think that's the one.
I would say, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is definitely one that I think will stand the test of time. I'm trying to think of something else in the past 10 years that I think I'm with you. Hereditary, definitely. is definitely one that I think kind of changed things. I hear people say this all the time, and it's like, ah, yeah, you're full of shit. But Halloween Ends, I think that's going to. I think over time, I think it's going to be like Halloween 3. It's going to be like people are going to give it a shot once their brain is clear of I don't know what. I don't know. I think that's one that people will come around on eventually. I really do.
I think it's a snapshot of just the time it was, that's the way it's going to be viewed, is it's a snapshot of the way society was, is that, this is how young men were treated, so, and it's going to be looked at from a psychological, sociological point of view,
I mean,
Now, I'm one of these people who's indifferent to the movie. It's neither great nor bad. It just is. It's like Eraserhead, I've
yeah,
seen the
I
movie
mean,
and I don't need to see it again. Serbian film, I've seen the movie. I don't need to see it again.
I've
I own it on Blu-ray.
I've triggered so
Yeah.
many people with that. I apologize, folks, but I'm just saying. I was at Horror Hound Weekend a month ago or whatever it was, and Rowan Campbell, the guy who played Corey Cunningham, was there, and he actually had a pretty busy table. And there was quite a few people cosplaying as Corey Cunningham from Halloween Ends.
They all wanted to take
with
a shit
the
on
mask
this table.
and I don't know, maybe. But I just think it's one that's, I don't know, revisit it in 20 years, and I think it'll be kind of a cult hit. It'll be kind of cool to say, like, oh, I loved Halloween Ends, but I don't.
This is
Maybe
comment
not,
of the
but-
night for me.
Speaking,
What's
what's that?
My balls off.
Uh,
That's pretty passionate take.
Speaking of taking a shit on someone's table at a convention, did you guys? I had heard
tell.
this. There was that HBO Max documentary about Nickelodeon,
Yeah.
and the guy from Return of the Living Dead,
Yeah,
Brian Peck.
Brian Peck. Yeah, Brian Peck is the pedophile, but somebody told me he still does conventions.
Yeah.
Have you guys? Now,
I knew.
That's like I would go over and just shit on his desk. I mean,
I remember
like they can't do
from
anything. Oh, he's a child molester. That's why
probably
he
the
shit on
first
his
convention
desk.
I ever went to. I would say 2013, 2014. I was really young, and I went, and he was there, and like we knew he was a creep. Even then, we were like, "Oh, fucking, is this piece of shit?" But I never knew who it was until that documentary. I was like, "What?" Like,
I didn't know he was a child molester until the documentary.
I knew that. I knew, and
Yeah,
they let him do like work on Disney shows after he narrated the Return of Living Dead, More Brains, the documentary of Return of Living. He narrates,
but none of those.
Thing.
If you watch that documentary, none of those other actors have anything nice to say about him. Like they're all kind of like Linnea Quigley and all them. They're like, that fucking guy's,
Yeah, they hated him, they hated him
before he was convicted. Yeah,
they hated him, and they hated Jules Shepard. They hated both their asses. But I mean,
yeah,
I don't know. I would join you in the shitting on Brian Peck's desk.
I can't believe he still does convention. I'm shocked that he still does conventions.
Yeah, they had a Return of the Living Dead reunion at Living Dead Weekend 2021, I think. I can't remember if he was there or not. I'm trying to think if he was there, but I don't feel like he was. So maybe he's not doing as many anymore, but
he's definitely not doing them after that HBO Max doc.
Yeah, probably not. No.
For good reason. Let's hopefully him and Victor Salva and the rest of these weirdos, they stay out of the public eye with that shit, because it's a disgrace. Where the hell were we? What were we? Were we on to the next topic? Who is next?
I think it was you, Grande.
Neil.
Oh, it's me. I'm next. Where's Goldberg spears me on my own show? So I had a question that I had made for like state of the genre now, but we did sort of talk about that. So let's do a fun one. Let's do like an anecdotal one. Nothing too deep here. Favorite horror movie theater experience in your life?
When I saw, when I saw Silent Night, Deadly Night on the big screen for the first time. I didn't see it when it was released, obviously, because it only played in a handful of theaters on the East Coast. So I'd gone, from teen years until my 40s, seeing it on a small screen, seeing it on television. And then when I saw Silent Night, Deadly Night in a theater with other people, I had seen it on TV with friends and whatnot. And like in the 90s, showing like having friends and say, "Hey, have you ever seen this?" Watching it. And they'd be like, "Why the fuck are you showing me this?" It's like, but then seeing it in a theater with an audience, with a packed audience, it was like I had never seen the movie before. It was like the first time I had ever watched it. And like people were laughing at scenes that it's like, oh yeah, that scene is funny. It's not something you catch, because I'd always been, oh, this is a grim movie. But there are scenes that are funny when you watch it with an audience, that are pretty funny. And I'm
I
not
always
talking
love
Silent
the
Night, Deadly Night 2. I'm talking
decapitation.
about the original. Yeah. Yeah, that was one of the ones. It's like that got a chuckle. And it's like, yeah, that's that for me was the best movie theater horror experience.
That's awesome. What were you with people when you saw it? Like, was it?
Yeah, we have here in Tacoma. I guess I'm giving them a plug. They have something called I don't live in Tacoma. I'm here in Seattle, but in Tacoma, which is about 45 minutes away, they have they do something called Friday Night Frights. It's at the Blue Mouse Theater. It's an old theater. And on Friday nights at 10 p.m., they show a different horror movie usually from the 70s or 80s. They're showing Dr. Butcher, MD, this Friday. So,
oh, cool.
Probably head down with that. So, yeah, and that's where I saw it. They showed it Christmas of 2019, right before the pandemic. So it was one of my last movie theater experiences too. And it's great because people show up, they cosplay when they show up to these things. There's cosplayers showing up, and it's just a great experience. It's all the horror fans locally show up, and it's like
was it 35 millimeter that you saw it on?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I saw it that same Christmas. It was Black Christmas on 35, followed by Silent Night, Deadly Night as a double. I had never watched them together, and the crowd was electric. It was so much fun. And like you said, when the laughing, there's a part where the kid punches the Santa. Like there's he's not the
and
evil
everybody
Santa.
laughs.
He's like, "Get away from me!" He punches him, and Santa takes a huge back bump, and the whole theater you felt the theater laughing. Like it was a great moment, man.
And like I said, it was like I had never seen the movie. It was like I was watching a completely new movie, because going years of watching it on a small screen and then watching it in HD and Blu-ray, nothing takes away the experience of a theater.
I agree. So I love, like, they do the retro. Like, just saw our favorite, me and Alpha's favorite movie, Dawn of the Dead, this past Saturday, and it literally sold out. The theater sold out.
Yeah,
I've never.
That's the way it was when I saw it in 3D a couple of years ago.
Oh, really? Oh, that's cool too. Yeah, that was my first time ever seeing it in the theater. Was the 3D, which wasn't the greatest. It was what
the seltzer bottle thing. I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, it was. Hey, it was Dawn of the Dead.
It was like,
whoa, I don't care if it was a 40X or whatever. I've
seen like when they re-released those Star Wars movies years ago.
Yeah.
Back in the 90s, I went to see Star Wars, and like halfway through, I was bored. That happened, and I love Dawn of the Dead. Don't get me wrong, I love that movie. Like the first time I saw it was a little kid, a teenager. Like I watched the movie, and then like I had to walk home alone from my friend's house. And I was convinced, zombie. It was because zombies weren't dime a dozen back then. So you're like, Jesus, it was like
Krishna
one of those
zombie coming out.
Yeah. I was like creeped out walking home, and but anyway, when I saw Dawn of the Dead 3D, I had that same feeling. It was like because I had seen it so many times. I've lost track of how many times I've seen it. That halfway through, I started getting bored. I'm like, oh, okay, I know what's happening. I know what's coming. So
how dare you?
You guys?
How dare I?
Theater experience.
And I love George. I love George Romero's movies. I've seen them. I've even seen There's Always Vanilla. So,
see what you got to do once you've seen Dawn of the Dead so many times, like I have. You just got to start picking out random things to try to see in the background and shit, and be like, "Oh, is that a building back there? What's that?"
Is that a palm tree?
Is that a trampoline?
Yeah, there was a point during the pandemic when not Mario Cuomo, Andrew Cuomo was holding these conferences every day, these daily news conferences that were broadcast on CNN. And one of them resembled that opening scene to Dawn of the Dead. There's just chaos, and he's in this warehouse, and all this stuff is behind him. and there's just chaos. People running around like cameras and everything,
Mhm.
and I'm like, wow, George got it back in '78.
Yeah, he knew.
Always ahead of his time. The Crazy's a perfect example.
Crazy's
Mhm.
definitely.
Mhm.
Probably the best. Speaking of George, probably the best theater experience I ever had. It's 2008. I was 19 years old,
You saw There's
and
Always Vanilla in the theater.
I thought
I
he was going to say
did.
Diary of the Dead.
I did see Diary of the Dead that year in the theater, but we went to Dallas, Texas. It was Texas Frightmare weekend that year. It was the 40th anniversary of Night of the Living Dead, and so they had a big Texas Frightmare. That was the whole thing. They had George was there, like everybody from all of George's films were there. It was the whole thing. So they had a screening of Night of the Living Dead in 35 millimeter. That all the cast and the crew and everybody was going to be there. And this was my first convention. I'd been a huge Romero fan for years and years and years. It was just like a dream come true for me. So we're sitting in the theater and George is there. I'm seeing George Romero for the first time. He's just like walking by me down the aisle, and I'm like, holy shit. Malcolm McDowell is there, and him and George are on the stage introducing that, and they're just talking and having a good time bullshitting. And I'm just like, holy shit, like I'm sitting here about to watch Night of the Living Dead. There's George Romero, there's Malcolm McDowell, all these people are around me, Judith O'Dea and, Russo and Russ Striner and all these people. So they start to play the movie. George walks out because he's seen the movie so many times, he just doesn't fucking care anymore. George walks out, we're watching the movie, and I'm sitting there watching this movie, and it just hits me. I look over to my left, and I see Tom Savini sitting right next to me with a thing of popcorn. Just
What?
Eating popcorn, watching the movie, and I'm just like, is this real fucking life right now? Like, what is going on? So that was probably the most surreal, like, movie theater experience I ever had. But in terms of just like, seeing a movie for the first time and just the crowd experience and stuff, probably The Devil's Rejects, like I was saying earlier. Like, that was just like, it was insane. Like, I thought that movie was going to be huge, like a huge blockbuster just from that. I was just like, holy shit, everybody loves this movie. And it was just like, but yeah, that Night of the Living Dead screening was a surreal moment for a 19-year-old kid who was just like seeing all this shit for the first time, just like,
George, I always thought George should have made a kaiju movie. And I don't mean direct a kaiju movie. He should have been in a kaiju movie because the
He could
motherfucker
have.
was like 7.5 foot tall.
He could have. He probably would have made one if they would have let him, but they wouldn't let him make anything if it didn't have fucking zombies in it. So,
Like when I saw him at a convention, that was like not what I expected. It was like, it's like, oh shit.
yeah, he was
He's
like
a big motherfucker.
6'6" or something like that.
He was 6'7", I think. Yeah.
He couldn't have been nicer. He was the nicest
Yeah.
horror celebrity
Yeah.
I've ever met, without a doubt.
Yeah, I remember at that convention, like he would come in, he'd sit down at his table, and of course, he had a line out the door. I mean, to meet him, you waited 2 hours or so, which I guess nowadays isn't that big of a deal. I've heard of way worse, but you
I
wait
waited
in line.
6.
Yeah, so we're sitting here waiting in line, and he sat at the table. I swear to God, I didn't see him get up once throughout the whole day. Like he would just sit there, sign, talk to people. Didn't get up once. I didn't see him leave to eat. I think he got up once to do like a panel or something like that, but just couldn't
And
be
he was
nicer. Couldn't be cooler.
He was a chain smoker, so that must have been tough.
Yeah, I was thinking about that too the other day. I was just like,
Yeah.
how did he like not step out for a smoke at any point? But I don't remember seeing him ever just like leave. He just said, I had a line of people, and it was just like, I'm gonna meet everybody, Whereas opposed to Elvira, who is like right down the way from him, she would show up late, leave early, wander off to wherever. Yeah,
She was at Monster Palooza in LA last year. We went down to LA for that, and she had a list of rules. Like, it's almost like the soup Nazi, from Seinfeld. List of rules of what you must do when you approach her, and she was behind glass, like plated glass. And,
wow.
And she doesn't want to get sick. She don't want to get COVID, which okay.
No, she was like that in 2008 too. Like there was a whole. She was definitely the most expensive autograph to get. Like everything. Like I remember Tom Atkins. We were standing at Tom Atkins' table one day when she walked in late. Like she was like 2 hours late, and she had a whole line of people just standing there waiting. She walked in 2 hours late, and Tom Atkins sees her walk in. We're just talking about whatever, and Tom looks over and he's just like, looks at us, looks over at her. He's like, it's about time you showed up, you fucking bitch.
Oh man.
And Tom was
That's
just
harsh.
like not having it. He was just like, just good. It was just like,
Well, he's got Tom Atkins has got to be pushing 90. It's at
yeah.
that
I mean,
point
he's getting up there. I mean, back in 2000, he was an older. I mean, you could tell he was a little.
He's at that
crotchety
age where
back
you can say
then.
whatever the fuck you want and get away.
Yeah,
with
he
it.
was just like, it's about time you showed up, you fucking bitch.
Yeah.
I was just like, geez, we're about to watch Elvira and Tom Atkins scrap right here in front of us. Holy shit.
That would have been a moment. How about you, Neil? What was your favorite horror theater experience?
All right, so I didn't get to see, you know, a lot of my favorite films, you know, when they came out in the theater because I was too young. And I don't know if you guys even knew or remember, but you know, back in the day, when Netflix first came out, they had a message board side to them where you could talk to other members on Netflix. And you could meet these people like based on your movie ratings or whatever, right? So I kind of like fell into a group of like 5 or 6 people that we sent messages back and forth about the movies that we were watching and everything. And when Netflix shut all of that down, we moved over to another site. I can't remember what it was called, but it was basically just another message board. And the group grew to, you know, probably 24 people or so. But, you know, these are just people that I knew online, you know, never met them, didn't even know what any of them looked like. Cause I mean, there was no, you know, you couldn't post pictures and shit like that. But one of the guys that was like one of the admins for the group lived in St. Louis, or still lives in St. Louis. And they had a theater there that first weekend of every month, they would show original 35 millimeter prints of classic films, classic horror films. And he mentioned that they were going to be playing Reanimator. So I was like, I'm coming. So I bought a plane ticket. I flew to St. Louis and I saw an original 35 millimeter print of Reanimator in a theater. And stayed the weekend with somebody I'd never met before in my life.
Worth the risk. Worth the risk.
Yeah, it was worth the risk. But it was great. It was great. You know, enjoyed the film. You know, had a great time. Yeah, I mean, so if you invite me to come see something with you, I'll come. I'm one of those people. So, you know, don't invite me if you don't think I'll show up. So
just make sure you got a place for you to crash, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was thoroughly expecting to have to get a hotel room. He goes, no, if you come, man, you can crash down on the couch down in the basement. Yeah, these 2 little attack chihuahuas that were fun.
That sounds like a hell of a weekend, man. No,
it was.
Reanimator in 35 was awesome. I have the theater by me that does similar to what Justin was saying. Like they do retro 35 millimeter screenings and they do all sorts of great classic horror movies. And they do every August they do an all-nighter and they do like a theme every year. And to me, the first one was my favorite because they did 8 movies back to back. It was 7 movies that they advertised, and then the last one was a mystery feature. And they showed, actually, funny enough, Elvira, Mistress of the Dark was one, Hellraiser, Creepshow 2, House, I think Blood Feast was one of them, The Stuff was one of them. Just
Which
a ton
house?
of movies.
Which house? Which house? The
House,
the American
1986.
or Japanese?
Okay. Yeah, Steve Miner.
The one with Norm.
Yeah, the one with Norm. And then the final, the mystery movie, and we're there, you know, holy shit, 12, 13 hours. And the final movie, they're coming to get you, Barbara. It was Night of the Living Dead. So it was so surreal, like for me to see all these movies back to back to back. And then I remember if you stayed the night, the whole thing, it was called pay to get out. So it was $50 for the ticket. But if you left, obviously they keep your money. If you stayed, you got like a percentage of your money back. So we got like, I think half of the money back and then free breakfast. They had eggs and bagels and shit out there. And I just remember being there like, I've been up for 30 something hours, watched just 8 movies in a row. And we're just like, wouldn't have it any other way. It was so cool. But as far as like movies that were new and I saw like when they were in their theatrical run, it would actually be Insidious, James Wan's movie, Insidious. We saw that opening night. It was a PG-13, and I was 13 when it came out. It was 2011, I want to say. And man, we are packed out middle of this theater. And man, that was a movie where the freaking jump scares just worked. Like popcorn flew in the air, people grabbing onto strangers, just an absolute electric atmosphere. It was absolutely the best theater experience I ever had. We just laughed and screamed and got scared. And to me, that's what it's all about. So I would say that one for me for like newly released movies at the time, but can't go wrong. Definitely can't go wrong with that stuff.
Yeah. I really enjoyed seeing Insidious in the theater too.
Me too. Yeah, no, it was.
I mean,
I think that's an awesome, really underrated movie. 13 in 1969. Nice. Sounds like a great time. Phantom Analog says Neo mad respect for the Iron Maiden setup. Up the irons, brother. Hell yeah, Iron Maiden rocks. First Insidious was awesome. Tons and tons of comments here. But Neil, my friend, you got the last topic of the night. No pressure. No pressure.
No pressure. All right. So this is the one that I was telling you. Inspired from something today. So one of my viewers left a comment on my review for John Carpenter's The Thing, and he was basically just stating that The Thing and my mind just went blank. Blade Runner both came out in 1982, and both of them basically bombed at the box office because everybody was going to see E.T. And it just got me thinking, because I remember, when E.T. came out, and, I grew up in Montgomery, Alabama. It's not a large city, but there was a movie theater, a couple of miles down from me, and it had 4 screens, and E.T. played at that theater for almost 2 years.
Wow.
Before it went away. And Poltergeist, which came out in 82 as well, also played at that theater for probably 6 months. The theater down at the mall, Raiders of the Lost Ark, was still playing when E.T. came out.
Wow.
So, movies back then stayed in the theater, as long as people were going to see them. But there wasn't, at least anywhere that I knew of, there was no such thing as a large multiplex theater. So the thing that got me thinking that I wanted to throw out to you guys was back in the 80s, if multiplexes were as common back then as they are now, how do you think that would have affected horror? Because I think you were saying earlier, Justin, that these blockbuster films were keeping, horror movies sometimes from even being able to be shown in some markets. So, you didn't get to see them in the theater, or if they did, they were quickly taken out because of some blockbuster film that was coming on. So if we'd had the multiplexes where they still could have, dedicated a few screens to, the smaller films that were coming out, that would have given, films like The Thing and Blade Runner a chance to actually have a successful theatrical run. And if they had that money coming in back in the 80s, how do you think that would have affected the genre as far as, the films that we got? Do you think it would be any different than what it is today? Or do you think it would be like maybe more advanced, I guess is what I'm trying to say, that we would be getting, better and better horror films because they would be, more popular with just general movie audiences?
That's an interesting question, because I think, I could be wrong, but I assumed a lot of those horror movies being made were for the VHS market. That's where the bucks were back then, were in VHS. So they knew maybe we can't make a lot of money in the theater in the multiplex, but we could once it's out on VHS. So I don't know. That's a interesting question, because horror movies were playing and they weren't playing in multiplexes. And multiplex, I think, because the multiplexes are still around. They are here in Seattle. They're still around here. The big AMC's and the Regal. I think
that's pretty much all we have here.
Yeah, that's it. I think there's, other than that, there's just mom and pop theaters. I don't know if that would have changed the genre. I think the genre changed once the VHS market took over in the mid '80s. Because prior to that, horror movies, I mean, it was common for any movie prior to that to play for several years in a theater. It would just, you know, it would make its way from the bigger theaters to the smaller theaters to the grindhouse theaters. Um, um, so, I mean, the multiplexes, when that happened, that basically, that in the VHS market, that destroyed the grindhouse and the drive-ins. That's for
Mhm.
Yeah.
sure. So and it was also the same time when I mentioned earlier, like movies like Nomads and Near Dark, and the movies that looked more like MTV videos started to be released, and less like, the grainy, low budget movies like The Prowler, or even Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Well, I feel
So
like a
Yeah,
lot of the movies, I feel like a lot of the horror films in the 80s, I felt like it was kind of the studios, the horror films that they really put a lot of promotion and backing behind in the 80s were the films that they were going to get a big opening weekend, and then they could take it out and make a bunch of money on VHS. And the big opening weekend movies were your Friday the 13th, your Nightmare on Elm Streets, your big movies. Whereas like movies like The Thing and Day of the Dead would be a perfect example. Like those type of movies are going to have a longer shelf life, as we've seen over the years. I think their popularity continues to grow. And I think it would have been the same thing with a theater. I feel like if there was room for it in a theater like a multiplex to have a spot for because like perfect example is, I don't know, just because I'm the Romero guy, I guess, but Creepshow comes to mind. Creepshow had a big opening weekend. It was #1 at the box office. Romero's only #1 box office film. And then after that, it was just like nothing. Like they were just like, okay, that's it.
They pulled the advertising, yeah.
Yeah, they made its money. Let's just go ahead and shoot it over to home video, and then that's that. So, uh, yeah, that's a good question. I don't really know. I really don't know how to answer that. Like,
Yeah, because I mean, the way that I'm thinking about it, just taking, Carpenter, as a director, um, you know, did any of his films do good theatrically?
Not a lot of them.
So
Starman.
what if they, what if they did? Yeah, and Starman was not a horror film, unfortunately.
Right.
Good
But
movie
Starman
though.
did well. Christine.
I like
Christine
it.
was a. Christine was a
Yeah, but it's a
blockbuster.
Stephen King adaptation,
Right.
so it had that going for it.
But
Probably.
John Carpenter insisted his name go above Stephen King. He wouldn't make the movie unless it was.
Oh, well, that was what it was
Sounds
always
like
John
Carpenter.
Carpenter's.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always John Carpenter's.
Also, I think, said that it pretty much admitted he did that as a payday. Like he wasn't really like his heart wasn't in Christine. Although Christine's a great movie, like he has said that was a job for him. Like that wasn't really a passion thing.
Yeah. So, just my line of thinking was, so if you had multiplexes back then, where they could have shown these films on more screens across the country, like they can now, that would have given, a director like, Romero and Carpenter, the chance to actually be successful, at the box office instead of after things came out on, video. So, what would their careers would have been like if they had been successful, in the eyes of the studios and given bigger budgets to work on, bigger films? Would that have raised the bar, even more than it was back in the 80s and, early 90s, to keep pushing horror, to where it would be even higher than it is today?
I actually think yes, because I mean, a perfect example. Look at the market for now. Like Jordan Peele made Get Out. It was a smash hit, made a lot of money. Then Us made a lot of money. Then like everything he makes seems to be making a lot of money. If those movies, the same movies, you go back to 1980 and release them, I'm assuming they might have a decent opening weekend, and then it might sell on VHS. They might like Alpha was saying, you have your big popcorn Friday the 13th movies, and then you have the ones that would have the shelf life that were the better films, like The Thing, like Day of the Dead, which, not to say I don't like Friday the 13th movies, but those movies were the Day of the Dead and, The Thing, those were better horror movies overall, like technical standpoint.
Right.
With Get Out, I think had that been released then, who knows if that has a big and that makes a lot of money, and then that could have been it. They might just pull the plug and say, yeah, this didn't make us the profit, cute. It did okay on home video, but you're not getting the money to do this, that, and the other. And like, that's just one guy. You could take a ton of different directors and names that get the opportunities that a George Romero was never afforded. I mean, you look at Romero's career, he got fucked over financially. It seemed like all the time. Like he wanted $6 million to make Day of the Dead. Oh, I can't do that. And if unrated, can't risk it. We'll give you 3.5. It's just, I think, yes, I think if you're right, if we limited the multiplexes and these, longer shelf life horror movies make more when they come out, these guys would have gotten the bigger budgets and chances to make their epic movies like they wanted. But you're right. I think,
yeah, because I'm just thinking back to when I was a kid, because we drove past that theater every day. So, I mean, I knew what was playing. And, the only time horror movies stayed with any longevity was, if it was the new Friday the 13th or if it was the new Halloween. Like I said, Poltergeist played for over 6 months, but I mean, that's a Steven Spielberg produced movie.
Yeah.
So it had Spielberg's name on it. They weren't going because it was Tobe Hooper. They were going because Spielberg, had made Raiders of the Lost Ark and all of these other, big ass movies.
But you also had like, you did have some directors like Tobe Hooper broke out and made Poltergeist, and then Joe Dante made he directed Piranha and The Howling, and then he made Gremlins. I mean,
James
some
Cameron
of these guys
were
James Cameron,
Terminator.
yeah. I mean, these guys who worked for Corman and whatnot, they did break out to make bigger films. But you're right. Maybe George Romero. That's just I mean, his life story would make a good movie.
His
like
career, it was the story of his career,
I mean,
really.
like. I mean, he gets fucked over every time he tries to make a movie. Like
I mean, he's
he's
one of the most talented directors and never got a chance.
He was going to remake. He was going to remake War of the Worlds at one point, and that would have been interesting because from what I heard, his take on it was pretty interesting.
Like The Mummy. He was going to do the remake of The Mummy originally. It was greenlit. Like they were like, all right, here's your budget. Your script's good. Let's go. And then he got fucked over last minute because he was under contract to MGM and they wouldn't let him make it with Universal.
And that script is out there now. You can read that script, and it's a pretty bonkers script. I mean, the mummy breaks into a mental institution, and it's a fight between the mummy and these crazy people. Yeah.
I know he was supposed to do Resident Evil as well, and me and Alpha talked about that on an episode. Like, it's crazy. That guy, it's this career of like what could have been with certain, and then you see guys that I think aren't as talented. Like, again, I don't think Jordan Peele is very talented, but he gets these, big budget movies. And
the thing about big budget movies is that the studios who are putting up the money to make these big budget movies are not looking for who is the best director, who is the best artist, who's going to do this or that. They're looking at who's going to manage our money the best. Like, who's going to make sure that they don't go over budget? Let's make sure that, every day they don't go over time. They do it in this succinct time period that we need them to do it, and it makes a profit. And if you can do that, they'll let you make anything.
Yeah,
and that's all they care about.
The Blumhouse approach is like the Marvel approach: is they hire directors to make studio films. They don't hire directors to make their own movies.
Right.
I mean, other than Jordan Peele, because Get Out is a Blumhouse film. Other than that movie, think about it. Are there any movies out there that that Blumhouse has put out in the past 15 years that you can say it was directed by a visionary?
Halloween Ends.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, have any of those directors gone on to, be the next Spielberg, other than Jordan Peele, the next Spielberg or the next Hitchcock? They haven't. I can't even name one of their directors. So, other than the guy who directed the Halloween Ends movies, but
yeah, I think
I can't even remember his name right now. But
I can't either. Actually,
is it David Gordon Green?
Yeah. He's the shits. That guy sucks. And I know he quit the 2 Exorcist sequels he promised he was going to do because he's a fucking quitter and his movies
probably
suck.
a good idea.
Yeah, it is a good idea. Retire, pal. Don Belleville says, "Hey, what's up, Don? This is asking if Babe Ruth would be any good in today's MLB. It just doesn't compute." Okay, that's an interesting take. That is an interesting take.
But he would. Babe Ruth would be good today. Today's
Babe
MLB.
Ruth is the man. Eat like 4 steaks, get drunk, and hit
Yeah.
2 home runs. What are your thoughts on directors shooting with digital instead of film? We can answer this one quickly before we wrap up here. Anybody?
I don't feel like I'm watching. I feel like I'm watching somebody's like wedding when it's digital. It takes me right out. It's like watching CGI. It just takes me right out of the movie. You know.
Actually, I'll second that.
I'll agree with that as well. I'm just like, I get it. It's cheaper. It's more efficient. You don't have to worry about, I mean, yeah, it's more convenient, I guess. I understand why they do it. It's just something you can tell. There's just something about it that doesn't, I don't know how to explain it. It doesn't hit quite like watching something shot on film.
Man,
I don't
depends
think
on the
most
movie.
people give a shit or can tell, but if you're people like us who love film and watch movies and actually give a shit about this type of stuff, you can tell.
Like the old shot on video movies in the 80s that went straight to VHS, there's something, even though they look shitty, there's something still idyllic about it. It just,
Film
I
has
don't know. There's something
grain.
about
I
the
like
digital.
my films have fucking grain in them. Like,
Yeah, there's just
I don't
something
know.
about the digital ones that, and a lot of them are. So sometimes you have no choice but to watch, some of these movies.
Mhm.
But yeah, Joe Bagos,
Yeah.
he still directs on film. He insists on. He bought his own 16 millimeter camera so that he can.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so
Gotta
he
love
can.
that.
Tarantino does too, doesn't he? I think he
Yeah,
refuses to use digital.
Yeah.
But Joe
I
Bagos,
saw the Hateful Eight
Yeah.
on 70 millimeter.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Mhm.
Yeah, he did that.
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
And
Joe
over-
Bagos insists on filming on 16 millimeter, and he bought a few cameras, and then he makes money to make his films by renting out 16 millimeter films to his 16 millimeter cameras to filmmakers. So, yeah.
That's awesome. Got to keep the old school alive. But fellas, we've been at this almost 2.5 hours. This has been a crazy,
really?
fun horror roundtable. I want to thank you all individually for coming on. Neil, Justin, Alpha, thank you guys so much. I don't think I put the link to these guys' channels. I will down below. Neil and Alpha have channel, and Justin has an awesome audio podcast, like we were saying in the beginning, with his son. So, please check out their stuff, their channels. Awesome people. And thank you guys, all of you, for coming on tonight. I had a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having
me.
me.
Good meeting you guys.
My pleasure. Same here.
Yeah, total strangers tonight on Grande's Graveyard, and I think it flowed pretty good. These total strangers talk for 2 hours, 20 minutes plus, so gotta love the little things. But everybody, we'll be back next week with 2 more guests, of course, as Mernzi's Movie Mansion, Dr. Howdy will be joining us for the Basket Case Trilogy Retrospective. Going to be a lot of fun, wrapping up the month of April. Everybody, if you want to comment down below, let us know your thoughts on this episode. Please do, and subscribe and watch these awesome people's channels. But everybody, we are signing off, and we will catch you next time only on the Graveyard. 2 Sweet Peace. Good night, everybody.
Later, guys.